across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Day 4 of the Iran war, and Hezbollah have fired missiles at central Israel. We'll speak to someone who's just come out of the bomb shelter. There are many Israelis underground trying to seek refuge from what is happening right across the region. The explosions continue. The diplomatic fallout continues too. We'll talk about that right throughout the evening. We'll also talk about the spring statement here in the UK. Growth has been downgraded, but Rachel Reeves thinks everything's fine. And a big exclusive about a usually sleepy part of the UK, which is just an absolutely shameful catalogue of errors, not just errors, but willful things that should not have happened. We'll talk about that in just a second. I'll give you all the details in just a minute. Talk exclusive coming up. We'll talk about Trump's talking about Starmer saying we're not dealing with Churchill. Well, we knew that, but now Donald Trump has said it, and what the implications are for the special relationship, if it indeed still exists. So much to talk about this evening. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute, please. You can send that to the main number. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message to the main number, or ring me on the main number for a discussion. 0344 499 1000. Stay with me here on Talk right through to 10 o'clock. So much to discuss. Well, there's a Talk exclusive story I want to bring to you now, and it is one that absolutely shocked me. One of my sources came to me earlier today and talked about this with me. This is a Talk exclusive story about Labour bosses being suspended after a fundraiser row in a rape trial case. So what has happened is that 2 senior Labour councillors have been suspended for reportedly promoting a crowdfunding campaign linked to the former town mayor who helped her son hide evidence from the police in a rape case. Nahid Ijaz, 61, the former mayor of Bracknell Forest, was convicted last month of perverting the course of justice. What she did was that her son, who had drugged and raped a 15-year-old girl, he's been convicted of that. When the police came to the door, what did the mayor do? Did she say, okay, come in, let justice be done? No. She told her son in Urdu to go upstairs and hide a phone on which the court heard there was a video of him raping the 15-year-old. Her son, who's 41, was convicted at the same trial of drugging and raping the teenage girl that happened 2 years ago. The political fallout has spread. Senior figures, Labour figures of the council were questioned by Conservatives and others as well about a crowdfunding campaign. This was after the point where these 2 scumbags were charged by the police. So you can say I stand by my friend, but when they are charged, then I think you've got to really step back from that. And what they did was they put together a crowdfunding campaign for them. Who were the 2 people who did that? The senior Labour councillors who did that? Well, the council leader, Councillor Mary Temperton, and another person, Roy Bailey. Councillor Roy Bailey was the cabinet member for children and young people in Bracknell Forest. The council member for children and young people was organising a crowdfunding campaign for a rapist and his mother, a rapist of a child and his mother, a paedophile and his mother. The 2 councillors have been administratively suspended from the Labour Party pending a disciplinary investigation. Labour spokesman said, "We were appalled to learn of the crime committed by Nahid Ijaz. It is right that justice has been served. The Labour Party takes all complaints seriously and they are fully investigated in line with our rules and procedures, and any appropriate action is taken." The council chief executive, Susan Hallowell, said, "Bracknell Forest Council has been made aware that 2 councillors have been suspended by their political party. This is an internal matter for the party and the council is not involved in party disciplinary processes. The councillors remain elected members of the council unless they choose to resign their seat." They haven't resigned their seats. As with all councillors, they're expected to continue to uphold the standards of public office and comply with the council's code of conduct. We have contacted Councillor Mary Temperton and Councillor Roy Bailey for comment. Now, they have said that Bracknell Forest... Oh, sorry, I've read that out. But there is a statement from them, which I will just get for you now. Because what has happened is that those two people, as I say, have been suspended from the Labour Party, but actually they're still drawing a salary as councillors. And interestingly, the person who is the Children and Young People cabinet member, well, he who was doing a crowdfunding campaign for a convicted, well, someone who was about to be convicted of rape and his mother, well, he is the father of Olivia Bailey, who is the Minister for Equalities in the government. She's an MP and Minister for Equalities. Absolutely jaw-dropping. We know that Olivia Bailey, who's the Labour MP for Reading West and Mid Berkshire, who is also the Minister for Equalities, said, "Violence against women and girls is utterly abhorrent, and it is right that justice has now been served in this case. I fully support the Labour Party's investigation into my father's deeply misguided action." Now, together, Mary Temperton and Roy Bailey, the two councillors who arranged this crowdfunding campaign, said, "We wholeheartedly apologise for this error in judgment. It was a completely misguided act of attempted charity made without the full facts. We have spent decades in public service and we are both mortified that an attempt at helping someone we believe to be in crisis could be construed as minimising or detracting from those appalling crimes." That is what has happened in Bracknell. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on in the programme, but I, for one, am shocked and horrified that we have not only a mayor and her son. The son is a rapist, a paedophile. The mother helped to cover that up. She's been convicted of perverting the court of justice. But two senior council members, the council leader and the cabinet member for children and young people, putting together a campaign, a crowdfunding campaign for that. Absolutely disgraceful. And you talk about historically, Keir Starmer talks about historically, the rape of children was covered up, and that we need to look into what happened previously. Well, it's happening right now. It's happening right now. That is what's happening. I'm going to talk about that a bit later in the programme. We're also going to talk, of course, about Israel, about the Middle East and Iran. Yoram Confino is Middle East correspondent and author and joins me now from Renana. Yoram, can you tell me what has been happening in Israel in the last few hours? Because, you know, Hezbollah has been firing on the region. You've been in shelters like every other Israeli. Tell us about this.
Yeah, it's quite an eventful evening here in Israel. We just came from bomb shelters once again. And this time around, it was Hezbollah that fired long-range missiles from Lebanon at central Israel. And that's why we didn't receive a notification on our phone. In the past couple of days, every time there's a ballistic missile, it's been coming from Iran. So you get a message on your phone saying in a few minutes, the rocket sirens will go off. Well, because Lebanon is much closer, you don't get that. You only get the siren, which is good. You get a minute and a half. Anyway, we ran for shelter and we're out again. A lot to say about this incident. I know that we're talking about Iran a lot, but this is turning out to be a regional war, and I think we should address the Lebanon aspect for now at least.
Please tell us your thoughts on that and what's happening.
So, first of all, it shows us several things. Hezbollah has not been disarmed, despite the Lebanese army saying and announcing that they had basically cleared southern Lebanon from Hezbollah members and disarmed the entire region. They announced that back in January, which Israel said, well, that's not true. And now we have perfect proof. Not only has Israel been hitting Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, which means we know that they're there, but now they're also firing both drones and long-range missiles from that area. That's number one. Number two, it also means that Hezbollah is now openly defying its own government, which it has been doing many, many times before, but now it's in an extremely weak position. And it's actually been outlawed. The prime minister announced that Hezbollah has essentially been outlawed. The justice minister wants to bring those who are firing rockets to justice. So this has the potential to ignite, I would say, almost a civil war in Lebanon, because Hezbollah is actively dragging the entire country into another huge war. Israel has already sent more ground troops into southern Lebanon overnight, and they are bombing Beirut several times a day currently. I spoke to a source earlier today who told me that Israel is not looking to hit the government, the Lebanese army, in any possible way. They're only going after Hezbollah because they don't want to have to deal with also the Lebanese army, which is essentially trying to rein in Hezbollah, but also because the United States has asked Israel to focus on Hezbollah. My source also told me other things, and now I'm shifting a bit to Iran. My source told me other things about what's happening on the ground right now. In my source's opinion, or according to Israeli assessment, it is enough for Israel to continue the war with Iran for 2 weeks. That means Israel will be in a good place, so to say. They will have achieved so much militarily that for Israel, that is essentially enough. Anything more than 2 weeks is seen as just a bliss. And lastly, my source also said that the Gulf states, which have been the recipients of hundreds of ballistic missiles and drones from Iran, they might be willing to go in and attack Iran, but they are a bit worried because they would effectively have to join an Israeli-American operation. Because logistically, it's impossible to avoid having to deal with Israel and the United States. And they are very worried, and this is very interesting, they're very worried that Israel is becoming too strong. So they don't want to be seen as fighting and giving Israel the military backing that they need to finish Iran off.
Just on that point, Yoram, really interestingly, we've seen a number of regional players who previously against Israel, the Abraham Accords and other things that have happened in the last few years have meant a truce, have made that they're not necessarily friends, but they get on, they trade together and so on. Now we're in a situation where they could be perhaps not forced, but perhaps persuaded to work together in some way. How uneasy is that? Because the kaleidoscope is really shifting in the Middle East, isn't it?
It's shifting so fast. On October the 7th, Yahya Sinwar single-handedly, well, him and many other Hamas members managed to destroy the path to normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. The past 2 years, the Gulf states have really had a hard time having anything to do with Israel, especially publicly, because of the condemnations over how they were conducting themselves in Gaza. The Gaza war seems to be so far away right now. We're looking at a whole different picture, which is the entire region, where it's essentially divided into two groups. You have Iran and their proxies, and then you have Israel, the United States, and all of the Arab moderate nations, which are now on the same side. They're being forced by Israel to stand on the same side because they are attacking them. Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Oman, the Emirates. It's simply too difficult to keep up with what's happening right now.
But it's also weirdly simple, isn't it, Yotam? It's also weirdly binary in terms of saying you're either for Iran or against Iran, and actually, if you're against Iran, you're going to be with Israel and the United States. So it's incredibly complex, but it's also kind of simple too.
It is simple, and I think many people in the region, and especially Prime Minister Netanyahu, has said for years, look, we are natural allies. Israel, Saudi Arabia, and other Arab nations. We might not agree on many things, such as the Palestinian issue. When push comes to shove, we're all facing the same menace, which is Iran, that are sponsoring terror groups that are not only hitting Israel, but also hitting the Gulf states. And now they're themselves sending ballistic missiles into residential areas and hotels in the Gulf nations. I don't think it's going to take long before Saudi Arabia, and especially the Emirates, are somehow going to do something about this. It's simply impossible for them to sit on their hands and not respond to daily attacks on their residential areas and civilian infrastructure.
Fascinating. Yotam, listen, thank you for your report there. We'll speak to you again soon. I'm sure Yotam Confino there, Middle East correspondent and author. I have his book. It's a great book. Lots to discuss. He's in Renana there. What do you think of what he said? And what do you think of the story that I was telling you as well about Bracknell here in the UK, about that disgusting and disgraceful crowdfunder for a paedophile headed up by two senior councillors in the council? Lots to discuss. 0344 499 1000. Be sure to get your call in and let me know what you think between now and 10. Stay with us.
no doubt that the British government has acted in an incredibly weak, equivocal way. It's easy to start a war, very difficult to ensure that the aftermath doesn't descend into complete chaos.
What's your view of that outburst of Trump?
Well, Trump doesn't mince his words, but I think his criticism is justified. I mean, we should have realised where our national interests stood, and he should have expressed immediate support.
We have pursued a ludicrous energy policy, preceding this government, frankly, and all the knock-on effects to that for our economy are catastrophic.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to the texter who has sent me this, the tweeter actually, Fair Brit, who says, shame on the Brits who told YouGov they opposed the war against the Iranian regime. More than 40,000 slaughtered by the said regime, meaningless because Britons hate Israel more. Well, that's a very interesting point, and actually that YouGov poll is something we're going to be talking about a little bit later on. By 49% to 28%, Britons oppose US strikes on Iran. 1 in 5 want the UK to condemn the US for its actions, while 12% want the government to praise America. Thank you to Betty, who says, also fresh interceptions in the UAE tonight, but flights trying to restart. Thanks for that. Great to see you, says this texter. Remember, the first people the IRGC wiped out were the socialists and woke feminists who got them into power in the 70s. Iran, same in 1930s Germany, using the socialist and communist laws and propaganda against them to wipe them out. They never learn. Another person says, Starmer is a joke and we have been shown to be inadequate when it comes to preparedness for any kind of attack. Our enemies must be rubbing their hands. Well, the relationship between the United Kingdom and America is under the spotlight tonight because Donald Trump earlier on was talking about Starmer and he said some very, very stark words. Let's hear them.
But this is not the age of Churchill. I will say the UK has been very, very uncooperative with that stupid island that they have, that they gave away and took a 100-year lease, having to do with perhaps indigenous people claiming the island that never even saw the island before. What's that all about? They ruin relationships. It's a shame. It's and that country, UK, and I love that country. I love it. My mother was born there. I love it. The UK, what they're doing with energy and what they're doing with immigration is horrible. The energy is through the roof, the highest in the world. And the immigration is, look, you have places where in the UK, you have a terrible mayor of London, terrible. He's an incompetent guy. But you have Sharia courts. You don't have Sharia courts. You don't want Sharia courts. You have Sharia courts adjudicating law. So it's very simple. Immigration, very importantly, immigration and energy. And you bring it back. Otherwise, you're not going to bring it back.
And then when it came to the Prime Minister himself, the President had this to say. And
I'm not, by the way, I'm not happy with the UK either. That island that you read about, the lease, okay, he made it for whatever reason, he made a lease of the island. Somebody came and took it away from him. And it's taken 3-4 days for us to work out where we can land there. It would have been much more convenient landing there as opposed to flying many extra hours. So we are very surprised. This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with.
Pretty damning. This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with. I mean, we knew that, but now you have the President of the United States saying it too. Fascinating to hear what some other parliamentarians have been talking about as well. We talked about the Green Party and the fact they're doing very, very well in a poll a little bit earlier on. But the question is, whose side are they on? Greens, Lib Dems, Labour left condemning the Iran strikes. Corbyn demands the Prime Minister chooses Iran over Trump. Jeremy Corbyn, former Labour leader, said that the attacks in Iran were a flagrant breach of international law, illegal, unprovoked and unjustifiable. Clearly, I'm not sure I remember Jeremy Corbyn talking about the 40,000 people that the regime murdered simply because they stood up to themselves. And that's only in the last few weeks. And of course, I wonder whether he declared in Parliament his interest, which is, of course, that he's been paid tens of thousands of pounds by Press TV, which was banned in the UK because it is just a mouthpiece for the Iranian regime. But it's not just him. It's Labour MPs, It's your party, Zara Sultana. Is the genocide of the Palestinian people not enough for this Labour government? Factually not a genocide. And various other people as well. Richard Bergen, I had the pleasure of interviewing him once, described the strikes as an extremely dangerous moment. Iraq, Afghanistan and Libya show where this can end up, with death, destruction, terror and chaos impacting tens of millions of people. By siding with Trump, hasn't the Prime Minister risked dragging us into wider conflict, which leaves us all less safe? The Labour MP Dame Emily Thornberry, chairwoman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, saying the attack on Iran by the US and Israel ill-advised, ill-judged and illegal. Let's speak to Philip Ingram, MBE, about this, former senior military intelligence officer. You want unity on this, and the beauty of a democracy, of course, is that not everybody has to think the same thing or move in the same direction. But actually, with the dithering and delay of Keir Starmer, being dragged and looking over his shoulder at a Green Party now ahead of him in the polls, can you understand these comments, Philip?
Oh, I can understand the comments completely. And, it's been exemplified, this dithering, fence-sitting, hand-wringing by the late deployment of HMS Dragon to try and protect the British sovereign base areas in Cyprus. The first role of a government is to protect the people of the country, and the people in the sovereign base areas in Cyprus are British, and we have British forces based there. And he could have made a decision 10 days ago to deploy HMS Dragon and HMS Duncan as well down there to provide that protective level. Not necessarily take part in the active fighting bit, because America's perfectly capable of doing that. But again, he's lying to the population, because we are actively supporting the Americans in a way that I can't go into any detail on it, but the Americans will be relying on elements of things that the British are doing to be able to target what they're doing into Iran and elsewhere. And Iran has cost the lives of British personnel. So, excuse me if I'm a little bit uncomfortable and sick of this fence sitting.
Yes, or not fence sitting, actually just being against the whole thing as well from some of the different MPs, including the Liberal Democrat leader Ed Davey, calling for a parliamentary vote on Sir Keir's decision to allow the US to use US bases for defensive action. Once again, President Trump has launched a unilateral and unlawful act. I mean, the fact is that you can use international law in basically any way you want. We had the Green MP Ellie Chown saying she condemned the deeply irresponsible and illegal attack on the US and Israel and Iran launched in the middle of a nuclear negotiations led by Trump, a clearly unstable loose cannon, and Netanyahu a war criminal. Well, I mean, she is alongside in her party someone called Mothan Ali, the deputy leader, her superior in the party, even though she's an MP, who went to a pro-Iran regime protest. We've invited them on the programme. We've invited Zach Polanski on the programme. Unsurprisingly, they're not coming on because that's totally unjustifiable.
Iran is the biggest sponsor of global terrorism by a long way. I've been tracking them for decades, teaching different terror groups around the world how to make improvised explosive devices, killing civilians in different places, killing military personnel. We lost 179 in Iraq. 13 died while I was there as the head of intelligence. My best friend was blown in two by an explosively formed projectile that came from Iran and Iran's technology. And therefore, this is slightly personal in the way we're looking at what's going on. Iran, they were sitting negotiating with the Americans, but they hadn't given anything. If we believe what Steve Witkoff said, and I'll take everything that he says with a pinch of salt, the US Special Representative, the opening remarks of the reigning government representatives whenever he sat down with them was, we've got 460 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, basically sticking two fingers up at the American negotiating team. If that wasn't provoking a reaction to say that there's an imminent threat, I don't know what is. And there's only so much you can take from an organisation and a regime that, if we look at the number of attacks that they put in against US interests alone in the last year across the region, it amounts to about 170. I think people have bitten their tongue for long enough, and it's hit us internationally with the attacks on the shipping in the Red Sea that's put the prices of a lot of the goods in our shops up and everything else. So this hand-wringing that's coming from people, they just don't sit down and realise what has actually happened, and they need to wake up to reality.
We also have, I wonder if you saw on social media, there were the usual suspects in Belfast who were campaigning against campaigning essentially for Iran and saying that these were illegal, dreadful acts, and Iranians came over to them, Iranians in Belfast, came over to them and said, why are you doing this? Why are you not standing up for us and the humanitarian cause that is there? I don't know if you saw that, Philip.
Well, I did see that, and the other thing that tickled me was the First Minister of Northern Ireland, Michelle O'Neill, has refused to go to any of the briefings that would give her a detailed understanding of what's going on and what is being put in place to support different populations. Whereas Saoirse Eastwood from the Alliance Party raised the issue in Parliament about Irish citizens, Irish passport holders who are resident in Northern Ireland and live in Northern Ireland, who would potentially be eligible for a British passport if they wanted to apply for it, but the Good Friday Agreement allows them to have Irish citizenship and only identify as that. And the government, on the back of what she has done in her engagement, has turned around and clarified and put a statement out this evening to say that all Irish passport holders who are resident in Northern Ireland can register through the British Embassy for the evacuation and the updates that are getting in. Michelle O'Neill, the First Minister, the Sinn Féin representative who's an abstentionist and doesn't want to talk to the British government, has failed in her duty to look after the people of Northern Ireland, whereas Saoirse Eastwood from the Alliance Party has looked after everyone.
We're also going to speak to the Deputy First Minister, Emma Little-Pengelly of the DUP. I think it may well be tomorrow night or Thursday night that we're going to talk to her, and she's been communicating and absolutely on the right side of this. Very, very interesting to talk to you as always, Philip. Thank you, Philip Ingram, MBE, former Senior Military Intelligence Officer. Let's speak to Karen in Bournemouth, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. First caller of the show today. Karen, what would you like to say?
Hi, Peter.
Hi there.
Saying that Keir Starmer's not defending this country or Iran is perfectly true, but he's been trying to undermine our security since he got in. First by scrapping Rwanda, then with Chagos, and he also lied to Trump over the Chagos Islands.
And Trump clearly very annoyed about that, as we saw in those clips a minute ago, Karen.
I know, so he should be. He's also reopened the trial of servicemen. He's supposed to be a forensic person. Now, either Homer is committing treason and not telling him that it's perfectly possible to go into. He couldn't be bothered to read the Wolfson report. And, I mean, international law is a bit like statistics. You can make it say what you want.
Yeah. No, listen...
and also to not prescribing the IRGC even now.
Yes.
And when he was asked about it yesterday, he didn't even answer that part of the question, didn't mention it.
Yeah, and I think sometimes I think the Conservatives aren't much better in this. I interviewed the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Priti Patel, on Sunday. She was, of course, the Home Secretary and said it's disgraceful that Labour hasn't prescribed the IRGC. I said, well, why didn't you do it as Home Secretary? And she couldn't quite answer that one. Karen, listen, thank you for that. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch as well. Dawn and Chelmsford said, I would imagine Putin is laughing at the UK because the special relationship with the USA is faltering because of the inept Starmer. Where does this end? And Amanda says, my heart is breaking when I see what's happening to this country. Never in our history has a leader brought such shame upon us with his unpatriotic actions and disregard for our partners, America. Dan and Kent, I'm not so disappointed by most. I'm not so disappointed by most about Starmer. He's the worst Prime Minister in history. Being a UK citizen, I don't want to be part of the worst war PM in history. And quite a lot coming in on the story we're going to be doing a little bit later on in the programme about what's happening in Bracknell, the scandal there that we have unearthed in our Talk exclusive. One person on Twitter says, Peter, please make sure you publish this latest Labour child pedo rape scandal that you have uncovered. It needs to be shared online for all of us to see. Well, listen, we will get that out there. I know there's at least one national newspaper following up this story as well. And Brian says, could those councillors be arrested for misconduct in public office as well as perverting the course of justice? We'll see what happens. Certainly they've been suspended by the Labour Party. Glyn and Catterick, my good God, is there ever a day that goes by where there isn't a Labour scandal or issue? This government absolutely boils my blood. It is appalling, says Glyn. So much more to discuss on the numbers as well. The spring statement today, you may have missed it because even though the economic news was bleak, of course there's so much else going on. And a former head of the policy unit for Rishi Sunak is going to join us in a second to tell us whether we're going to be better off or not. Growth is slowing, inflation could come down too, but still, of course, prices going up. Lots to discuss with him. And I'll get your thoughts as well. 0344 499 1000. Whatever's on the tip of your tongue, whatever you want to talk about it, we want to talk about it here in the evening between 7 and 10 here on Talk. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's talk about the spring statement. You may have even missed it, but the Chancellor keeping her head down, having this forecast, a little bit of a sort of mini fiscal event-ish. Everything you need to know we will talk about now. Obviously, the war in the Middle East is something that's having an impact on that. Growth as well, forecast to slow from 1.4% to 1.1%. Remember, Labour said before the 2024 election that they wanted growth and that was their key priority. Well, you don't hear too much about that now because it ain't happening. Let's speak to James Nation, former head of policy for Rishi Sunak, and a man who knows a few things about numbers. James, what do you make of the spring statement?
Great to be with you, Peter. Firstly, let me just say something that your viewers might laugh at, but I think you'll appreciate. It is quite hard for the Treasury to do nothing. So the fact they didn't do anything today is in and of itself an achievement.
Wow.
I mean, let's talk about whether it's realistic, but to actually not have what we would call a fiscal event where people will remember some of the speculation on tax last year. Will it go up, won't it? Is she going to make a change here, there, everywhere? None of that this time round.
Although I would argue Rachel Reeves is actually most comfortable when she has nothing to say.
Some may indeed say that, but yeah, I think, look, you know, in and of itself, Peter, the fact that, you know, there wasn't tinkering with policy today, I think the Treasury would say, we'll bank that. But look, the question is, was this statement in any way reflective of the world that is unfolding before us, and then also various political and economic issues that we know are coming down the track? So on the world before us, I mean, you mentioned some of the issues there up top. I mean, the government wanted to trumpet that inflation is set to come back to the Bank of England's 2% target faster than expected, that there are projected improvements in living standards. I can tell you, forget it if there is going to be a sustained energy price shock and a knock-on impact on bills. Too early to say, but certainly based on developments so far, and you know, various people have talked about this on your show, I'm sure, earlier today. Based on what we've seen so far, there's a definite concern there. And then just in terms of what else is coming down the track, I mean, we know, for instance, that the Chancellor is under pressure on the decision to freeze repayment thresholds for student loans. We know, for instance, and this again relates to the Iran unfolding conflict, that there is a big gaping pressure when it comes to defence. I mean, we've still got the Treasury and the Ministry of Defence wrangling behind the scenes on publishing the UK's defence investment plan.
And that £28 billion black hole we heard about a few weeks ago.
Indeed. Now, look, I will. You could take the boy. You could take the boy out the Treasury, but not Treasury out the boy. I think 28 billion is probably the armed forces, Peter, putting out their toppy number.
Right.
But undeniably, I don't think plans as are set out currently are enough. And for sure, there's going to need to be a funding solution found for defence. But we didn't hear about it today. We didn't hear about how the government is going to fund planned and now delayed reforms to special educational needs in schools. My point here is this: Rachel Reeves just needed her stability day. The Chancellor just needed a day to say, I'm not tinkering, my headroom is up slightly, you know, things are stable under me, and deal with everything else down the line. The problem is, given the unfolding situation in the Middle East and comments she's given to other media outlets tonight, it may well be the Chancellor is having to return sooner than she might like to deal with the unfolding situation. Because
the stability that she talked about actually isn't there, perhaps. The unemployment rate, let's talk through some of these bits of information that we got to do. The unemployment rate expected to peak later this year at 5.3%. 1 in 20 people who can work out of work. That's 1.9 million people. That's just not sustainable, is it? As well as the people on welfare payments, many of whom, of course, totally legitimately, but others who could do some work but are doing no work.
Are not. So look, total spend on welfare that I think I was reading today is projected to be as much as the, you know, total GDP of Norway. You know, looking at unemployment, particularly youth unemployment, you know, the Chancellor was very careful in her language today. We've got to do more, implying she's going to come back later with the growth speech that she's doing in a few weeks' time. But here we know, Peter, that government policy just hasn't helped when we think about the cumulative burden that many of your listeners and viewers will appreciate around the increases to employer national insurance, the desire to try and equalise the minimum wage for younger workers with the national living wage, which is just putting too much of a burden on smaller employers now in particular. And I think what you're seeing here is the chance to try and sort of prepare the ground to reverse ferret on some of this stuff, not on tax, but I think when it comes to the living wage and that minimum wage point for younger workers, when it comes to what I mentioned earlier around student loans, I just think you're going to see an adjustment here, because the government know that they cannot have this bad youth unemployment and overall unemployment situation sustain itself, both from an economic perspective, but also if you think politically, when you're, losing younger professional voters to the Greens now, as well as other parties, they've got a political problem there they need to fix.
Well, I was actually going to ask you about that, and you've led rather beautifully into it, about the fact that Labour is now behind in the polls. There isn't an election tomorrow. Things may change dramatically in 3 years or whenever the next election is. But you've got Reform UK on 23%. The Greens just 2 points down from that on 21%. Conservatives and Labour on 16%, and the Liberal Democrats on 14%. The fact that the Greens are second, this is, as Anthony Wells, the global head of politics, election and public data at YouGov said, this is the highest we've had the Greens in a voting intention poll. The first time we've had them in second place. It's also the lowest we have had Labour. What do you make of that, James?
Well, also, and we should add this morning, I think More in Common had a poll which showed that the Greens are only 3 points off Labour in terms of who's trusted to manage the economy.
That's astonishing.
Tories,
that is astonishing.
Which is astonishing. It's astonishing. And I think part of the problem here, Peter, and I've heard Labour strategists make this point, so it's not an original point, is I think there's a bit of a disconnect between who the party would like to think they represent and who their voting base actually is now, or at least was in the 2024 election. If you consider that, I think under the latest YouGov numbers, Labour are only holding on to half of their 2024 voters. And yes, there's a bleed to reform, but there's a bleed to other parties as well, primarily the Greens now. It just shows you that, they are losing those kind of younger professional voters, and there's an appeal there. And there's an appeal that Zach Polanski is really managing to capture at the moment, but without acknowledging any economic trade-offs, which is why I go back to where I started, that it's astonishing that you have got the Greens as close to Labour as you have now on economic competence. And I think what we're seeing when we take a massive step back is, yes, we are used to fragmentation and the split on the right of British politics, and clearly not good news for the Conservative Party at all at the moment and last week. But we're seeing that fragmentation on the left now. And what I don't yet see is, if I was a Treasury Special Advisor working for Rachel Reeves, what is my political economic strategy to combat that?
Yeah.
And we have not had an answer.
Yeah,
yet.
what's the sell? Was this perhaps an opportunity missed? Did she just need to get through this? Or could she have used today to actually say, right, all those people going to the Green Party, this is why a Labour government is better for you, and potentially Lib Dem and Conservative voters as well. She's probably not going to persuade too many Reform UK voters, although we know lots of people have gone from Labour to Reform, and it's too lazy to say that this is simply left-right. So actually, was this an opportunity missed today?
Well, she did try and create some space in saying there's going to be this growth speech she'll give in a few weeks' time. And she did say in there that a theme in that is going to be part of what I'm talking about, addressing opportunities for younger people alongside Innovation Europe. And that last one, Europe, is definitely designed to appeal to voters on the left as well. But I think she was in tension today, Peter, because she needed today to be a non-event, because in many ways that confirms what her and Keir Starmer, for better or worse, think is their key selling point and strategy, that they are the ones keeping the forces of the markets at bay, if you like, and they are just steady as she goes, maintaining stability. But I don't think any Labour MP is coming away from that today thinking we've got some great new lines to take post-Gorton.
Or any of our viewers and listeners, James, thinking I'll be better off as a result of what the Chancellor says. Listen, thank you. Thank you, as always, James Nation there, former Head of Policy to Rishi Sunak. Really interesting to hear from him. What do you think of the spring statement? Did you watch it? Was it on your radar? Was it something that you feel has made any impact on your life? Maybe Rachel Reeves is someone you feel just just isn't making an impact at all. Whatever you think, let me know. 0344 499 1000. Barry says we will negotiate on the beaches, we will negotiate on the landing grounds, we will negotiate on the fields and the streets, and we will never stop negotiating. Another person says, I just hope our allies realise it's not the British people. No one agrees with this behaviour. We have depleted forces and our closest allies are now turning their backs. Starmer out tomorrow. Leslie in Hartley says the Spring statement left me in despair. Just so many words in the ubiquitous breakfast clubs. With so much going on in the world, we just need direction and hope. Leslie, that is a absolutely bang on remark, and I remember a very senior person in Downing Street saying to me one time, in Rishi Sunak's administration, not James Nation, but someone even above him, said to me, what people need is competence and hope. What they want from a government, I'm not sure they got it from Rishi Sunak, but what they want is competence. Yes, we can do this, and here's a bit of hope. Things are going to get better. I don't think we're getting any of that, and Leslie, I agree with you on every single word that you have said. David is a former Royal Marines commander. We have some incredibly accomplished people who listen to this programme, let me tell you. I will vent my anchor. Sanchez of Spain and Starmer in the UK are little more than Marxists and Quislings, says David, and I will bite my tongue no longer. This country has been taken over by Islamists, apologists and appeasers. Trump stands on the right side of history, says David. I think a lot of people, a lot of our viewers and listeners feel the same way too. We're going to be talking about a horrible story in just a second. One thing that has happened in this country, and this is the fact that a man, this is witnesses describing a knifeman attacking another man in the street opposite a school. Armed police arresting the suspect in Birmingham after a man was stabbed and a woman injured near a primary school. We'll get the latest on that. Mike Neville, one of our crime commentators, is coming up in just a second. I'll take some of your calls as well before 8 o'clock and right through till 10 as well. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
No doubt that the British government has acted in an incredibly weak, equivocal way. It's easy to start a war, very difficult to ensure that the aftermath doesn't descend into complete chaos.
What's your view of that outburst of Trump?
Well, Trump doesn't mince his words, but I think his criticism is justified. I mean, we should have realised where our national interest stood, and he should have expressed immediate support.
We have pursued a ludicrous energy policy, preceding this government, frankly, and all the knock-on effects to that for our economy are catastrophic.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's talk now about an absolutely dreadful and disturbing story in Birmingham. Armed police arresting a suspect after a man was stabbed and a woman injured near a primary school. Mike Neville is a retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector and our crime commentator this evening. Mike, great to talk to you. Just tell us the detail of this.
Well, sadly, in the last 20 minutes, Peter, it's been revealed that the man, the victim, the male victim, has died.
Oh, goodness.
The woman is not had life-suffering injuries, life-changing injuries, it's said. And this all took place around lunchtime today in Alum Rock, which is a very Pakistani area of Birmingham. A man outside or near to a primary school and nursery. There's dreadful footage which is on social media of the police trying to help the male victim by performing CPR. Obviously, that didn't work. The knife man, then barricaded himself in a flat, and he was eventually arrested by armed police.
So they will be questioning him at the moment. This happened around lunchtime. Passer-by said he'd driven his van at the knifeman in an attempt to stop the attack, and happening very, very close to a primary school as well. Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that gets me here, though, Peter, is that we look at last week with the Manchester Central Mosque. It was quickly announced that the suspect was a white man in his 50s. If you remember the incident... They're all over the place on this. They're all over the place on this, Mike, and it drives me completely mad because they need to be consistent and they need to say what people's ethnicity is so we can all know. Yeah, I mean, the West Midlands police have got form for this. I mean, in 2020, there was a dreadful case where a man was running around, he killed one person, was randomly running around stabbing people, and the West Midlands police didn't say what he looked like. So it's not as though you could actually either avoid this person or spot him. And like I say, in Liverpool, we had the same, where the man did those wicked acts driving into the cars. I was on that night, and they were really clear that it was a white man in his 50s. They were clear from a couple of hours into that. I was broadcasting that evening, and they were very, very clear about that. There needs to be consistency here. They need to be very clear what's happening. What it does, of course, it creates but the police can deny all they want that there's two-tier policing, but all this does to the public is confirm that. And the trust and confidence in the police is at rock bottom at the moment. And this sort of thing does not help. There's hard-working officers. You saw the officers, performing CPR on somebody who's, bleeding to death. There's officers who are charging towards a madman with a knife. So these junior officers on the street are doing their very, very best to make us all safe. And then senior officers in the press department are making crass decisions, which they try to hide the truth. All it does is create more rumours. It creates a vacuum, and that vacuum is quickly filled. Let's have the truth in every incident so people can judge what has happened. And just have a standard procedure across all police forces in the UK. Just to give a bit more detail on what happened in Birmingham, the suspect ran into a block of flats, barricaded himself inside. A woman with bloodied hands was seen screaming from an upstairs window that the man was outside her door. Armed officers running down the street, telling bystanders to leave the scene, describing it as a siege. You talked about the CPR on the victim there, who appeared to be barefoot and covered in blood. Spokesman for the West Midlands Ambulance Service said crews arrived to find a man with serious injuries, administered advanced life support on the scene. A second patient, a woman, was treated for less serious injuries. As Mike has updated us there, that man has now very sadly died. The 32-year-old arrested in connection with the stabbing is in police custody. The van driver was talking about this, saying, I saw a guy on the floor covered in blood. I parked my van and jumped out to help him. I don't care what colour or religion you are, you help people. The next thing, the guy with a knife tried to attack me. The driver said that he used his van to get him, but he kept coming before the man ran into the flats. There was a woman screaming from one of the flats, so perhaps the attack started there. And West Midlands Police said that we believe this to be a contained incident. A man is in custody. We're reviewing CCTV footage and speaking to a number of people in the area. We understand how deeply distressing and concerning this incident is, and we will have extra officers in the area to offer reassurance to the community. Surely they could offer greater reassurance to the community by giving the full facts of this case. Yeah, absolutely, and it's not as though they can hide things, because we see it on social media. Look at the incident in Edinburgh as well earlier this week, where the man is hanging out of a flat. People can see what the truth is, who is doing these crimes, and I'm grateful to Talk and stations like Talk for being able to discuss the truth of this, because for too long, for decades,
Politicians have tried to cover up the reality of crime in this country. And unless we confront the reality, you can never deal with the problem.
Absolutely
and
correct.
We've brought people in here to this nation who are a wicked threat, who committing these awful crimes, near schools. We've got enough bad people of our own without importing them. It's absolutely scandalous.
Mike, thank you. Mike Neville, retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. Lots of people getting in touch about Iran and Rachel Reeves as well. Elisa in Chelmsford said, I started to watch Rachel Reeves today, then realised that I was dozing off. I switched to Netflix. Lots of different people getting in touch, including Mark in Lincolnshire. Is this to say about our brave servicemen and women? This is what Mark in Lincolnshire has sent in on a voice note.
Hi, Peter. Yeah, it's just regarding what I keep hearing about our presence in the Middle East at the moment from a UK position. Everything is just negativity, negativity, negativity. None of this changes the reality on the ground for the lads and lasses out there putting themselves on the line for this country. They can't help the fact that they maybe have to borrow, beg and borrow from other militaries for basic kit and have few resources to actually be able to do the job they need to do. That's not their fault. We could quadruple funding for them today. They're still going to have to deal with the situation right now. All this negativity coming out from whether it's Reform, whether it's Labour, whether it's Tories, whoever it is, they don't get a say in the decisions. They're just there putting themselves on the line, and there's not one of them out there right now knows they're coming home from this operation. So can we show a bit of bloody respect for them, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That's a very good message, and I agree with the sentiments. Let's speak to Melody in Stevenage. She's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. A new caller, Melody. Great to talk to you. What would you like to say this evening?
Hello, hi. Thank you very much for taking my call. I am a British Iranian, and I just want to talk about why, from my perspective and other British Iranians, the UK government's stance feels so inadequate.
Go ahead, Melody. I think I'm about to agree with you.
Yeah, so I think there are several patterns here, a reluctance to declare and formally designate the IRGC as a terrorist organization, despite repeated calls from activists, MPs and human rights groups, despite everything we've seen happening in Iran, the massacre of people, the government that is actually, committing genocide against their own people should not be taken into any sort of agreement and, ongoing diplomatic or economic ties that we've got with the Islamic Republic in Iran, whilst they are.
How does that feel for you, Melody? How long have you been in this country, Melody?
I've been here for 20 years, and I'm not really a political person. I'm a management consultant, but being born in Iran, that's kind of something that comes with you because you're always struggling with the repression and the difference between the government and the actual people of Iran.
Of course,
is
of
massive.
course. And how long did you live in Iran then?
18. I left Iran when I was 18.
So about half your life then?
I've never actually lived an adult life in Iran, and I haven't been back to Iran for over 11 years now, because I'm worried about going there and not being able to come back. I don't know if you recall Nazanin, another British Iranian lady.
Yes, Nazanin Zaghari Ratliff, yeah.
Yes. Since I've got my daughter, and she's 11 now, just before that, I've not left this country. I've never been back to Iran. I won't be able to risk that. And unless we got a free Iran where people would safely feel comfortable to go.
How does that feel to not be able to go back to your homeland because of the repression that is happening there?
It's awful, because I am mourning every death in Iran as if they were my family member. I still got family members. I've got a sister. My mom is back in Iran, and all my extended families are back in Iran. So I feel I'm actually abandoning them, and I'm here in the safety of, the country that I am living in, whilst they are fighting, they are putting their lives at risk, going out for basic human rights, basic what you want to wear going out, regardless of whether you are a man or a woman. Even men are not allowed to wear short sleep.
Melody, it's just coming up to 8 o'clock, so we have to go to the news.
Yeah.
Could you just stay there for 2 or 3 minutes, and I'll speak to you again after the news? Would that be okay?
Yeah.
I've so much more I want to talk to you about. Melody is going to stay with us. She's in Stevenage. She's a British Iranian. We're going to talk to her. We're also going to talk to Andrew Fox and Jonathan Sacerdoti about what's happening in Iran. We'll talk about the Greens overtaking Labour. All of this is linked. The whole thing is linked. There's so much to talk about. I want to talk to you too. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me as well, 87222. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
The Iran War, Day 4, we're going to be covering that from every angle. Jonathan Sacerdoti, the Jewish journalist who knows all the region backwards, he will talk to us, as will Andrew Fox. We've got Melody waiting on the line from Stevenage. We heard a little bit from her before the news. We're going to hear more from her now, because she is telling us what it is like to have lived in Iran and to be in this country and to see the weakness of the Prime Minister. Speaking of political weakness, a horrendous story in Bracknell. We know in breaking news, I've just been told the council leader has resigned after a scandal about a crowdfunder campaign for legal fees for someone who went on to be convicted of rape of a 15-year-old, a paedophile, who was the mayoral consort, and the mayor themselves, his mother, who told him to hide a phone in Urdu, told him to hide a phone on which he had filmed the rape. Then 2 senior councillors in the council in Bracknell decided to support them with a crowdfunder. One of them has resigned this evening. The other one, who was the head of Children and Youth Services, has not resigned but has been suspended. We'll come to that story a little bit later on in the programme, but I just wanted to bring you that update. Of course, I want you to give me a ring, just as Melody has done. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a voice note, less than a minute please, just as Mark did earlier, 0344 499 1000. That's the number for WhatsApp text messages and for phone calls too. So much to discuss, including with Melody in just a second, here on Talk. Let's go back to that call we had a moment ago with Melody from Stevenage. Just a reminder, Melody is an Iranian-British woman. She's been in this country for 20 years. Melody, thank you for holding. I really appreciate it. I just wondered if I could ask you how it feels to be in the situation you're in. You were telling us about your sister who's still in Iran. You were telling us about your mother as well. Have you had any communication with them in the last few days? Is it possible to communicate with them?
It's very difficult to communicate. I mean, like in January, as you're aware, there was shutdown of internet for over 2 weeks.
Yes.
We had no communication with our family members. My sister managed to contact us on Saturday. That's the last conversation we had, and she contacted because I've got 2 sisters here, one back in Iran. She managed to contact one of us and said they are okay so far. I've lost a lot of friends and distant family members just in the past 2 months. So
what has happened? And obviously those have they been part of those protests?
The protest. And my sister's neighbour, for instance, have been trying to find the body of their child, who is only 18. For over a week, they had to go to the morgue because it's filled with body bags, and they had to go and look. They haven't been able to locate their loved ones because of the sheer amount of death tolls, and a lot of them you can see still have on their bodies they got medical patches, breathing tubes, etc. On them, and you can see a headshot on the forehead, which it just indicates that they've been taken from hospitals, which seems to be the case, and they're executing or putting the doctors up for execution because they simply were doing what their oath was to protect and do no harm, but because they are looking after the protesters, which are against the Islamic Republic in Iran and the IRGC, they simply are getting rid of anyone. And the news that you're seeing now with all, the war between Israel and US, majority of the Iranians inside and outside are happy about this.
Yeah.
We wanted this. We've been asking for some sort of action. Our government here in the UK, they do make public statements that we stand with people of Iran, but in reality, there's no concrete action. There's literally no action. It's been silenced. They're complicit with this government.
There's so many politicians as well, Melody, that are talking about this being illegal, talking about war crimes, talking about things that are against international law. My question to them is, where were you when those 40,000 people were murdered by the regime? Where were you talking about international law then? Melody, you must feel a long way away from your family. It must be very difficult for you. I can hear it in your voice.
It is very, very, I am far, in a distance, but I'm not really watching it from distance. I feel it with every single bone in my body, and the pain, and they feel that I am actually, I'm unable to do anything positive. I go to the marches outside of Downing Street. I go to the marches outside of the Islamic Republic embassy, where we are calling out for the government to just declare that they are terrorists like everywhere else.
But Melody, Melody, yes. that is positive. That is positive action. You're doing positive things. You're doing all you can in a very, very difficult situation to support your family, and I want you to remember that, because you're doing all that you can. You must be very powerless, but actually I was there just over a week ago outside Downing Street before this all kicked off. I actually was very honoured to speak for a short period of time to the crowd that were there, and I saw people like you, maybe you were even in that crowd, I saw people like you who were flying their flags with the lion on it, who were shouting, who were chanting, who were supporting people, doing all they could. And I want you to know that that is positive action. That is a positive, important thing. You're on the right side of history and you're supporting your family.
Yeah, thank you. And it's not easy. I'm a disabled individual, so I'm in a wheelchair. And for me, going to London, trying to go every week, simply because I can't do anything else. I can't stay home, just mourning and grieving. There's so many children that have been killed by this government, have been raped. The bodies are not being returned until people pay bullet fee, which is basically you're supposed to pay for the bullet that they use to kill.
That is just unconscionable. That is just something I can't even comprehend how cruel that is.
Yeah, and that's it. For instance, we had family members that had to pay. It's something equivalent in our kind of currency here, like £100,000 you pay to get the body of your loved one, or you have to sign a paper saying that they were actually with the government and not the protesters, and the protesters killed your loved one. Otherwise, you have to pay the bullet fee. And this is what people have to face with, and why you see Iranians are dancing when they want to grieve their loved ones, because they sacrifice their lives for the freedom and the liberation of the next generation. And if others, like UK government, don't support them, we won't be able to do it. The Iranian people on the ground won't be able to do it, because we are unarmed civilians. We don't have anything, and we are facing a government so brutal that not only they kill their own people, they bring militias from other countries to support them kill more people. They would be willing to bomb their own people and say that, oh, it was US. We knew for so long that they're keeping a lot of the bodies to just bring them out, saying, yeah, the Israel or US attacked and these other bodies. We lived in Iran, and we know our government. So it is very, very, very difficult to explain this to British people who have not lived under oppression.
And I feel, and I expect you feel, that so many people just don't get it. What is your message to those people who would say, oh, far away, another foreign war, money, petrol prices going up, all sorts of difficulties, we shouldn't intervene, we should focus on what's happening in this country? What would you say to those people, Melody? Because it's so important that people understand this, and you can put it far better than I can. What would your message to them be?
My message would be that we're all human, regardless of where we are born and grew up. And if we have some sort of humanity in us, we should do our best to support others to live a free life and not be scared of their own police and their own government. If we only look at our own little bubbles, we would never be able to make any change in the world, at least for our next generations. Islamic Republic is not just a threat to its own people. As you can see, it's a threat to the area, and
and in this country too. They've targeted people in this country. Yeah, and they've targeted people in this country too. Melody, thank you for your call. I'd like to speak to you again at some point. Please give me a ring anytime, and maybe we'll be back in touch with you, because you've spoken brilliantly, and you've done a positive thing this evening for your family and for your people by lifting the phone. So I want to thank you for doing that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
That's Melody in Stevenage there. Just incredible. I have just the hairs in the back of my neck are standing up listening to that incredible personal testimony of Melody, talking about her family, talking about her people, and what they have been through and are going through right now. Andrew Fox is a Senior Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, former Major in the Parachute Regiment. Andrew, apologies for keeping you waiting, but I think you will agree with me that people needed to hear Melody's story and the human side of it. What do you make of what she said and what is happening now in the Middle East, particularly in Iran?
Yeah, very worth waiting for. It tallies absolutely with a lot of the Iranian activists that I've spoken to. You just hear horror story after horror story about how utterly and unbelievably monstrous this regime are. And they're quite frankly getting everything they deserve at this point. The war is going on at a pace. It's changing hour by hour, minute by minute. We're seeing a huge degradation of the capabilities of the Iranians. We're seeing their command structure being dismantled. We're seeing their rocket launchers being hunted. But at the moment, they are still getting rounds off, and they are still causing significant troubles for the rest of the Gulf and for Israel. And those missile interceptor stocks are going to be getting depleted. So it's going to be very interesting to watch over the next 72 hours to see if the Israelis and Americans can hunt down more of these drones, more of these launches, and reduce the rate of fire that's coming out of Iran at the moment.
What is actually happening in Cyprus, and what about British forces and their involvement here? Is it just defensive, or is it offensive as well? And if it isn't offensive, can we be in any way prevented from getting into some form of offensive action here?
Well, in Cyprus, we have two British Army sovereign bases, as well as the Royal Air Force base down at Akrotiri, which is on the southern tip of the island. There's a number of military aircraft fly out of there, including the American U-2 spy plane. And we've seen drones from Hezbollah in Lebanon being fired across the Mediterranean, one of which has impacted at RAF Akrotiri. We're aware right now of British jets in the air above Jordan, defending their airspace against incursions from Iranian drones. That's clearly not only helping the Jordanians, but it's also helping us in Cyprus if any missiles come across that airspace and head over the Med. We've had a British F-35 get its first ever kill in active combat, so that's a positive for the UK. But it is still firmly on the defensive side of things, and I don't yet envisage any kind of scenario where we join in on bombing alongside the Israelis and the Americans in Iran itself.
I just want to play a clip that you may have seen, but some of our viewers and listeners may not, of Donald Trump speaking specifically about Keir Starmer and his view of Keir Starmer, because you and I know, you far better than I, Andrew, that the special relationship is so incredibly important for so many reasons, economically, culturally, but particularly militarily. Yet, here we are on Tuesday, 4 days into this war, and this is what Donald Trump not only thinks, but is prepared to say publicly about Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
And I'm not, by the way, I'm not happy with the UK either. That island that you read about, the lease, okay, he made it for whatever reason, he made a lease of the island. Somebody came and took it away from him. And it's taken 3-4 days for us to work out where we can land there. It would have been much more convenient landing there as opposed to flying many extra hours. So we are very surprised. This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with.
Donald Trump speaking there, the President of the United States. I mean, what do you make of that, Andrew? This is not a good position to be in. We're meant to be in concert with our close allies, aren't we?
Look, I think America's done significant damage to the special relationship over the last year. They've threatened to attack NATO. They've mocked our war debt. The special relationship is on the rocks long before this ever kicked in. Not to mention the White House collusion with Russia over the Ukraine issue, which is our single greatest security threat right now. But I do think Starmer has taken the line that is going to make him look as weak as possible. He's played this politically so poorly. Like, Prime Minister, take a line and stick to it. If he'd said no, that's fine, stick with it. If he'd said yes, that's fine, stick with it. But this flip-flopping, it just looks absolutely ridiculous. And it makes us a laughingstock on the world stage.
What should he do?
Well, I think he has to press ahead with this course now. I think defensive actions in Cyprus are a must. That goes without saying. But we have been exposed in terms of our lack of air defence and drone defence to the point where the only thing we can really do is send a Type 45 destroyer to the Mediterranean because we don't have any sort of ground-based assets that'll do the job. So that's significantly different. It's, of course, entirely appropriate that we defend our allies. We have very close relationships, particularly with the Jordanians, and the Qataris and the Bahrainis. We've worked very closely with all three of those, and they've all taken hits during this conflict, and it's absolutely right and correct that we stand next to them. I'd like to see us standing with Israel more closely. I think that would be entirely appropriate to do. But unfortunately, British public opinion is firmly against that after 2 years of Hamas propaganda being blasted over our airways and turning us against as a country. The Israelis who've been valiantly defending themselves against Iran and all its proxies since 7th of October. So I'd like to see that happen too, but I don't think it will. When it comes to defending ourselves, if we do take any direct hits, we have already. I don't think Mr. Starmer sees that as enough to escalate to an offensive position. It would be great for our standing in the world if we could get on the front foot slightly. But that said, the Americans and the Israelis are more than capable of dealing with the Iranians themselves. They don't need us. They don't particularly want us. So at least by standing with our allies in the Middle East, we are doing the right thing, if nothing else.
Andrew, thank you. That's Andrew Fox, their Senior Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, former Major in the Parachute Regiment. Rubio is speaking at the moment, the US Secretary of State. He's giving an update. We'll see if we can get some lines out of that, or perhaps even get him live after the break. Stay with us here on Talk.
No doubt that the British government has acted in an incredibly weak, equivocal way. It's easy to start a war, very difficult to ensure that the aftermath doesn't descend into complete chaos.
What's your view of that outburst of Trump?
Well, Trump doesn't mince his words, but I think his criticism is justified. I mean, we should have realised where our national interests stood, and he should have expressed immediate support.
We have pursued a ludicrous energy policy, preceding this government, frankly, and all the knock-on effects to that for our economy are catastrophic.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's go live to Washington and the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio giving an update on Iran.
That decision had been made. The president systematically made a decision to systematically destroy this terroristic capability that they had, and we carried that out. I was very clear in that answer. This was a question of timing, of why this had to happen as a joint operation, not the question of the intent. Once the president made a decision that negotiations were not going to work, that they were playing us on the negotiations, and that this was a threat that was untenable, the decision was made to strike them. That's what I said yesterday, and you guys need to play it. And if you're going to play these statements, you need to play the whole statement, not clip it to reach a narrative that you want to do, all right?
This is your statement. What do you make of the,
Go ahead.
What do you make of the war powers resolution that you consider?
I mean, Congress votes on those. They can if they want. There's mechanisms for it. We've complied with the War Powers Act, even though we believe it's unconstitutional, as has every other administration. Every other president has found the War Powers Act to be unconstitutional. Nonetheless, we notified Gang of Eight, which is an appropriate mechanism by which to notify Congress. We sent the notification within 48 hours, the way the law requires. I'm here today to have, I don't know, my 6th or 7th briefing before the entirety of the House and Senate, which is far more than I ever got from any administration in the time that I was here, certainly when I was a member of the Gang of Eight. And so we've over-complied with the law and what it requires. This is an action by the president to address a real threat a real threat. This is hostilities designed to eliminate a threat to the safety and the security of the United States and to our allies.
Was there a plan in place to evacuate Americans before the attack?
Well, that's the plan we're trying to carry out. The problem is, or the challenge we are facing, is airspace closures. If a country closes their airport, for example, in some cases the airports have been hit. So the airport in Kuwait was hit. So if an airport's been attacked or the airspace is closed, then we can have the planes lined up to go, but we can't get them to land because we don't have the permissions to land there. So that's the challenge, but rest assured, we are confident that we are going to be able to assist every American. As I told you right now, we have about a little over 1,500, maybe closer to 1,600 Americans requesting assistance, and we know that we're going to be able to help them. It's going to take a little time because we don't control the airspace closures. That said, there may be more people out there that need help. We need to know who you are. So please, I'm asking the media, publicize the phone numbers and the website because we need people to call in so we have their name, we have their contact information, we have their location and their request. So as these opportunities begin to open up, we can act very quickly to reach them and get them out of harm's way.
I want to just clarify what you said. Because you said...
There's nothing to clarify.
Well, but you said I would give them...
No, but you have to read, if you're going to read the whole statement.
But your quote is about, we knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that would precipitate an attack.
Yeah, no, I understand. But listen, all right, let me understand.
And that's what...
Yeah, but I had a very specific question from that gentleman, right?
The president said...
Hold on 1 second. I asked the
Air Force Israelis.
Okay, but let me answer because this is my press conference. Okay. I was asked a very specific question. So you guys can misrepresent it, but I was asked a very specific question yesterday. The bottom line is this. The president determined we were not going to get hit first. It's that simple, guys. We are not going to put Americans' troops in harm's way. If you tell the president of the United States that if we don't go first, we're going to have more people killed and more people injured, the president's going to go first. That's what he did. That's what the president will always do. He will always put the safety and security of our men and women in uniform and of all Americans before anything else. He's always going to do that, and that's what he did here. In addition to that, I would argue that this threat from Iran, they are hiding behind these missiles and hiding behind these drones. They wanted to reach a point where you couldn't touch them, and then they could do whatever the hell they wanted with their nuclear program. And there was no way in the world that this terroristic regime was going to get nuclear weapons, not under Donald Trump's watch.
So the U.S. attacked...
Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, speaking on Capitol Hill in Washington there. Well, listening to some of that is Jonathan Sacerdoti, the writer and broadcaster. Jonathan, you've been writing a lot about what has happened in the last 4 days. What do you make about what Rubio was saying there, the foreign minister of the US?
Well, Rubio there is trying to answer claims that arose after he spoke yesterday to the press, because some people, especially in the kind of loony right, the MAGA right in the US, have said that he admitted yesterday that Israel dragged the US into this war. And that's not what he said at all. He's quite right to point out that people need to listen to the whole answer he gave. I actually posted it earlier on my X because it's not what people have said it was. He did mention that because Israel was going to strike, the US knew that there could be a retaliation against them, and that helped them decide on the timing. But he said that no matter what, they were going to strike themselves, and he's reiterating that now. So I think the point that he's making is that the precise calculation of when they decided to strike, when the US decided to strike in Iran, was dictated by all sorts of considerations. But most of all, it was the consideration that Iran, the regime there, was rushing towards nuclear weapons capability and rushing towards ballistic missile capability that would give them impunity to act in the future, even worse than they're doing now. And as he said yesterday, if you think what they're doing now, lashing out at the whole region as they are, aiming at civilians as they are, is bad, then you need to think what they would have done in a less exhausted situation. They are very much weakened from the 12-day war in June. They're very much weakened now, even from this strike, from this series of strikes from the US and Israel, and still they're doing a lot of damage. So that was his point. His point was that the US, under Donald Trump, he said, would not allow them to go nuclear, and not just for a couple of years, but in fact, Vice President Vance said on Fox last night that the president was interested in stopping them going nuclear ever. And I think that is what this US administration has been pursuing.
He says as well that they were played in the negotiations over Iran's nuclear capability. Tell us your thoughts on that.
Well, again, if you watched a lot of Fox News last night, there were quite a few different interviews. There was one from Benjamin Netanyahu. There was Steve Witkoff, one of the negotiators for Trump in those nuclear talks. There was JD Vance. So we got a good snapshot of what the thinking was behind what's going on. And what Witkoff said was that in the negotiations, the opening negotiating position of the Iranians to him and Jared Kushner was that they had enough nuclear fuel, enough nuclear material, nearly at the right concentration for 11 nuclear bombs. That was how the Iranians, he said, opened the negotiations with that threat. Now, what that proved, he said, is that they never had the intention of not pursuing nuclear weapons. There was no need for them to have this 460 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%. He said that just proved that all along they had been playing the world. They'd been playing the negotiators. They'd been playing these negotiations. They'd played Obama. They'd played everyone. Their intention was always to stall for time, which is what the Iranian regime has always done in negotiations, and to slowly but surely push on towards nuclear weapons capability. And I think that is another reason that they've clearly expressed under Donald Trump's administration that they decided that enough was enough. They really did put a lot of effort into these negotiations. They put a lot of effort into building up the military threat to apply pressure for the negotiations. I think at the point at which they realized they were being played or lied to, or there was no intention on the Iranian Islamic Republic regime's part to soften or to compromise, they decided to act militarily.
Yes. Where are we right now? It's day 4. We know that these strikes have happened on Iran. They've happened in many other parts from Iran, parts of the Middle East. This bombing continues. Has it got worse? Has it got better? Has it been escalated to a great degree? You've been following this really, really closely. I just wonder what your impressions are of both sides of this and where it is going militarily right now.
Right. Well, it's hard to say how long it will last. It's hard to say exactly how it will go, but we can observe a few things. One is that the amount of ballistic missile bombing from the Iranian regime is reducing, and that is a suggestion that they have a lack of ability to carry out such major barrages as maybe they started with. That's partly because the Israelis and the Americans have been targeting relentlessly their launchers, their supplies, their silos, their manufacturing capabilities of the ballistic missiles. And because they're now catching the actual launch sites and the launchers before they get to use them, it's massively reducing the Islamic Republic's ability to launch as many of the ballistic missiles. But that isn't stopping them. They are, as you said, lashing out across the whole region at other Arab countries, at other states in the Gulf. They're also, of course, targeting Israel quite relentlessly, and there are people in Israel constantly running in and out of bomb shelters. But we've seen airports, oil facilities, energy facilities, consular facilities, all of them targeted by the Islamic Republic regime. That does seem to be going down. I think something like a quarter of the launch facilities that they were believed to have at the beginning of these 4 days have now been taken out. And that's something which I think the Americans and the Israelis are going to continue to pursue in order to wear them down. But on the other hand, the Iranian policy of targeting all these other countries, including our own, including British military base, including Italian or French facilities, including in Cyprus, all of this is designed to try and draw in pressure from international players on the US and Israel to stop the military activity altogether. And that seems to be the Iranian intention, because they haven't really got the power to beat this military action. But what they can try to do is drag it out, try to bring as many other international players in, putting pressure on the Americans in order to stop them. And then they think, again, if they can stall for time, if they can just survive, the regime may then be able to build itself back. Their ultimate hope of eliminating Israel, wiping it out, of death to America, death to Israel, of spreading this 12 Shia Islamic fundamentalist idea of the end of days, that could all come later, as long as they can just survive longer than, say, the midterms, or longer than, say, the Trump presidency. And that all along is the way that they act. So I think that that is a great misunderstanding that many people have about how this Iranian regime does act in these situations.
What about the other players in the region? Because we're seeing a number of very unlikely states, obviously context of the Abraham Accords and all the rest of it. We're seeing a number of unlikely states essentially aligning with Israel, and that is something that many of them are feeling pretty nervous about. The kaleidoscope seems to be shifting.
Well, there had been a bit of a wobble over the last couple of years between Saudi Arabia and Israel. You'll remember that normalization, as people called it, between Saudi Arabia and Israel was always on the cards. And then after October the 7th, that really did freeze or stop. It didn't get reversed as far as we could tell, but it did seem to be something that was not imminent as maybe it had been once considered to be. And now there was also the cooling, let's say, in relations between Saudi and the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. Now that seems to be a little bit improved now as well, because both of them being targeted by the Iranians. So I think in this context, the animosity of the Iranian regime towards these other Gulf states, towards other countries in the region, has perhaps united them a little bit against Iran. And of course, that has been Israel's position all along. Israel has always been fiercely opposed to the Iranian regime, which wants to eliminate Israel. It has a declared aim to literally wipe out the state of Israel. So I think that it might have that unifying power, but it might also risk putting a lot of pressure on America, putting pressure on Israel to stop the military actions so that those attacks on those countries might stop too. And you can see that Israel, of course, people there don't enjoy it. People are dying and homes are being destroyed by the ballistic missiles. But there is something of a familiarity, let's say, with that kind of wartime status. And those people there do see this as a very worthwhile war. The polling has shown a massive support for these actions, even though individuals feel in Israel more personally at risk at the moment. Obviously, they feel that as a state, as a nation, as a people, this is making them stronger potentially. And I think that that's the kind of ethos that they are getting behind. And similarly, in politics, even the opposition leader, Yair Lapid, has said that on this issue, he stands squarely with the actions of the Prime Minister, and he does support what's going on there. So I think there's the possibility that this can unify within Israel, even outside Israel. There's also the possibility that eventually it will apply pressure on all the players and make them reconsider. So what happens in the coming days and weeks will be definitely very much worth watching to see how Israel and the US do manage to push forward. They've had an enormous amount of military success so far. Trump says things have gone a lot faster than expected. We know that they managed to eliminate something like 40 of the major leadership in that just first strike in the beginning. So an awful lot of wins, but of course there is a lot of pain in the region as well, with the Iranians continuing to launch those very, very vicious attacks on countries across the whole region.
Jonathan, thank you. Jonathan Sacerdoti, the writer and broadcaster. Appreciate your analysis this evening. Paul's been in touch and says, Marco Rubio is a class act. I wish we had a politician of his calibre in our government. Paul, I feel exactly the same way. He is a brilliant communicator. That is something that Marion County Down has been in touch about as well. Rubio is the best political media performer, bar none. Wholeheartedly agree with you, Mary. Jim in Cambridge talking about that interview a little bit earlier on with Melody, the British Iranian woman. She is a hero, says Jim. I am a 68-year-old man. My eyes are dripping. Paula in Kent says, I'm shedding tears for Melody and the Iranian people. She is brave and her family will be proud. Outstanding conversation, Peter. Thank you. I cannot believe this country and the protest for a deadly regime. I wish those people would walk a day in the life of an Iranian under the dictatorship. Thank you, Melody, for calling in and sharing, says Paula in Kent. Well, thank you, Paula. And also Margaret says, Melody, we are all with you, sending you love and warm wishes. I hope to speak to Melody on another occasion. We've taken her number and we may well give her a ring back to see if she will give us an update on what is happening, especially with her family, because it is a very, very difficult time for them, certainly, and she outlined that in a very articulate way. We're going to talk in just a second about the impact here in this country, because there is a poll. It is only one poll, but it says that the Green Party are now second. The Green Party, of course, which their deputy leader was at a protest in favour, supporting the Ayatollah. Yes, really. Britain 2026. More on that next. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has got in touch, including on Twitter. Just looking at some of the remarks that people have made there during the break. Shazzer Mack says, I've been listening to Melody. My heart is breaking for her. If she has any difficulty getting to any protest, I will happily drive her and join her. I live in the Midlands, but I would be pleased to help. What a lovely message. Les says, given the very urgent necessity to massively increase armed services, hardware and manpower, surely it is time to slash the benefit culture, get the unemployed out to work and legislate emergency powers to close the borders against illegal immigration. But how can the forces have any confidence in a Prime Minister who dithers at best and has allowed attempts to prosecute servicemen years later? Who would fight for Starmer? He instills zero confidence, and the US President is correct to quote, "We're dealing with no Winston Churchill here." What a disaster. Well, interestingly, the political sands are shifting, but there are so many political figures as well who have talked about Iran, including Zach Polanski, the leader of the Green Party, and Jeremy Corbyn. Let's have a look at what they've been saying.
Dragging the UK into another illegal war does not make us any more safe. And polling shows over and over again that the majority of people in this country do not want our UK bases to be used by US military. And the only reason why this is happening is Keir Starmer is incapable of standing up to Donald Trump.
More horror and a great deal of money being made by arms manufacturers all around the world. Can't we in this country do something to try and bring about peace there by persuading the US to go back to the negotiating table with Iran as quickly as possible?
To be clear, the use of British bases is limited to the agreed defensive purposes. We are not joining the US and Israeli offensive strikes. The basis for our decision is the collective self-defence of long-standing friends and allies and protecting British lives. It is in accordance with international law.
Zach Polanski, leader of the Green Party, Jeremy Corbyn, who's something in your party, and Keir Starmer there. Jeremy Corbyn talking about a great deal of money made by arms manufacturers. No room in that interview for him to mention the tens of thousands of pounds he has received as a broadcaster from Press TV, the pro-Iranian broadcaster, which has been now banned in the UK. He's an apologist for the Iranian regime, and he is someone who I believe is a disgraceful human being who, in my strongly held personal belief, is an anti-Semite. Zach Polanski from the Green Party is reaping the whirlwind of all of this. You've got to look at the polls, okay? It's one poll and polls change and there are probably 3 years until an election. But by 49% to 28%, British people oppose US strikes on Iran. So Zach Polanski is factually correct in what he's saying. Look at the voting intention as well. Reform 23%, Green 21%, Labour and Conservatives on 16% each. We're seeing, for lots of reasons, not least what has happened in the last 4 days, not least what has happened in the last 2.5 years since those disgraceful Hamas terrorist attacks on the 7th of October. The sands are shifting in UK politics. I want to speak to Maxwell Marlowe, Director of Research at the Adam Smith Institute, about this. Maxwell, we're in a situation, yes, it's a YouGov poll, they're generally pretty reliable. Yes, the election, there isn't an election tomorrow, it's 3 years away, but we are seeing Reform doing well at 23%, Greens at 21%. The first time their global head of politics says the highest we've had the Greens in a voting intention poll, the first time we've had them in second place, and the lowest they've had Labour. The sands are shifting.
They're totally shifting entirely, Peter. And, what we're seeing as well is a really good book actually about this called The Great Realignment by Dr. Steve Davies, who's actually a fellow at the Institute of Economic Affairs. And it's not just in the UK. Let's remember this, Peter. It's across the West. We see De Linke doing really well in Germany. We see the far left and also the far right in France. We see Trump, who is obviously a much more right-wing character than the GOP usually would have in America. Everything is going awry, and there's really not one way one can put things. And I think in the UK especially, we have the issue of Keir Starmer not being a strong leader at all. Trump said as much. We've got obviously got Kemi Badenoch too, who tries to say a lot, isn't really heard. Farage, who's genuinely a Marmite figure, and then finally Zach Polanski, as we're calling him now, obviously great friend of Mohsen Ali, who somehow found his way at a pro-Iran protest, a pro-jihadist protest, and
let's just take a little second just to digest that. So we have the Green Party on 21%, about one in five people, more than that.
1 in 5 people. Under the age of 50.
In this country, want to vote for the Green Party. Okay, so we have this is voting intention overall. So I think it's people over 50 as well want to vote for the Green Party, and their deputy leader is someone who was at a protest in favour of an Islamist regime in Iran, which has been murdering and maiming tens of thousands of people. This guy could be an MP after the next election. If there's another by-election, he might be an MP. We already have 4 pro-Gaza MPs in Parliament already. There are so many issues abroad that are having a big effect, and I would argue a very pernicious and worrying effect on exactly what is happening in our politics here in this country, Maxwell.
Well, Peter, I think you're understating it. He could be Deputy Prime Minister if the Greens win, at the next election, which I think, let's not understate this. He's Deputy Leader of the Green Party. Could not just be Deputy Prime Minister. That's the really concerning thing about this at the end of the day. I mean, it's not just that, though, of course. I will say, with this poll, I've had a look at the numbers. It is just that so many people between the ages of 18 and 30 are in favour of the Green Party that it moves the numbers up as an average, right? But we can look at that and we can see why, right? Because this Labour government have been creating ginormous amounts of unemployment. They've been really pushing the cost of living up. And where else do young people have to turn? Now, look, I've known you, Peter, for a very long time now. 3 years, I've been on the show quite a lot. I'm of a right-centre opinion, but I'm quite weird in that aspect. I've studied economics, I've studied politics. I know where I stand. For a lot of people who don't have the same, taste, and people who don't really know the facts as much as your viewers at talkTV, they move to the left immediately because it just sounds good. Rent controls, and what US is bad, etc., etc.
And what worries me as well is this kind of red-green alliance too. This idea that you have the previously largely harmless Greens who wanted to get us all to recycle and hug trees, and the eco-loons essentially, who I disagree with, but I don't think are fundamentally bad people who want to destroy our society, who are aligning with fundamentally bad people who do want to destroy our society, who do want to destroy our way of life. You have this very weird alliance, this red-green alliance that is happening. We've seen it in numerous places previously, but I'm talking about people who are on those pro-Palestinian marches, many of them people who are not only in favour of Hamas and Hezbollah, for example, actual terrorism and advocating for terrorists, many of them not arrested, but the people who are perhaps members of the Green Party, other parties as well, who are going along with that and allowing them to survive and thrive.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no wonder that the Hamas grouping use their symbol is the watermelon, green on the outside, blood red on the inside. And we see that time and time again with all of these movements, Peter. I mean, there's no surprise that we see on university campuses, for example, UCL, a really
University College
here.
London, yeah.
Absolutely. Using, having their student groups go out and say, oh, yes, well, we'll have a memorial in favour of that vile, terrible, rapist dictator, Ayatollah Khomeini, who thankfully was vaporised recently.
There's one happening tomorrow in Manchester as well, which we talked about on the programme yesterday. Absolutely horrendous.
Exactly.
It is fascinating to see where things are, but it's a very worrying time as well. Thank you for guiding us through it. Maxwell Marlowe there, Director of Research at the Adam Smith Institute. Lots of people getting in touch on the Green Party aspect. Elisa in Chelmsford says, I believe that most people who say they will vote Green have absolutely no idea what they stand for. I experienced this with a close friend. She thought they were all about the environment, but when I put her straight, her reaction was, oh my God. Thank you to the texter who says, Starmer is no Churchill. He isn't even the calibre of the Churchill nodding dog in the insurance adverts. Lots to discuss on all of this. We're going to take your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes next. Use the break, lift the phone, let us know what you think. This is my show, but it's your show too. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
no doubt that the British government has acted in an incredibly weak, equivocal way. It's easy to start a war, very difficult to ensure that the aftermath doesn't descend into complete chaos.
What's your view of that outburst of Trump?
Well, Trump doesn't mince his words, but I think his criticism is justified. I mean, we should have realised where our national interest stood, and he should have expressed immediate support.
We have pursued a ludicrous energy policy, preceding this government, frankly, and all the knock-on effects to that for our economy are catastrophic.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I've just had it confirmed in the break there that Emma Little-Pengelly, who is the Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland, she will be joining us tomorrow night. The Democratic Unionists, very interesting party there, the biggest unionist party, and of course she has been standing up for the attacks on Iran, saying that they are the right thing and trying to help people by joining the briefings that she's entitled to as essentially the joint First Minister in Northern Ireland. So we'll speak to her tomorrow night. Her counterpart from Sinn Féin, Michelle O'Neill, saying that she doesn't want to have those briefings and is being heavily criticised for it. We'll talk about all of that. Let's go to Belfast now, actually. Michael's there and he's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Michael, what point would you like to make tonight? I think it's the Green Party you want to talk about.
Oh, hi, Peter. Yeah, it's been a beautiful sunny day in Belfast with beautiful blue skies.
Lovely.
But unfortunately, the dark clouds of Westminster are overtaking my thoughts tonight. This is the worst thing about this political situation at the minute, is it just makes everybody feel so sad, you know, even on a lovely day.
Yeah.
But I this last month, Peter, it's really convinced me that I think politics is on hold after what I've seen in the last month. I think we need a completely new system.
What is it about the last month particularly?
Well, it started with me when the 2-cap child benefit was suddenly reversed, another Labour U-turn, and I thought, why? Got me thinking, and it's clear after this last week that the Islamists are now controlling the Labour Party.
You think that's what you're worried about?
It's clear. It's clear.
And why do you think that, Michael?
Well, if you look at them voting for a Palestinian state, if you look at Rachel Reeves' friendship with this person she didn't know, she met him 27 times. I lived in England, and I think they say this Denton and Gorton by-election, but they don't mention Fallowfield. Denton and Gorton are quite white places. I lived in Manchester. Fallowfield, you've heard of the Kerry Mile, you'll have known it. You've probably been there, Peter. That's been 100% Asian area for the last 40 years, and it's got bigger and bigger. That's who won the vote in the Denton and Gorton by-election.
And of course, so many allegations from independent observers, not political people, independent observers about family voting there. We know that's a big problem in the Muslim community. And the Green Party as well. We talked about that Red-Green Alliance a minute ago. There are clearly Islamists within the Green Party that are hijacking that party.
It should be called the Red, Green, White and Black Party, not the Green Party, because of Palestine. But that's back to the Islamists. This is the problem. It annoys me when people go on about the Greens. This problem is much deeper. The Greens are just being used. Now, I'll be as quick as I can here, Peter, but the demographics of the political system in England is, if you look at a map of red and blue, Tory and Labour, all the rural areas are blue.
Yeah.
All the cities are red. That's where the MPs are, and that's where the Muslims now control a lot of the politics in those cities. So the people that live in the rural areas of England, they're just totally ostracised from this political system now. You've got 15% people controlling the Labour Party, And Peter, I'm really sad to say this, they're going to control Reform as well. Reform are filling their cabinet with Muslims because they want the votes. They're not stupid.
But there is a difference. They're not in the politics, the outlook of Mothin Ali versus Zia Yusuf. I mean, they're two very different people.
What can I say to that? I can't say anything to that. You know, I can't disagree or agree with that.
My argument would be that if you have, I agree with you on the Green Party. I think that there is an Islamist takeover. I think that is happening. But I believe, I've met Zia Yusuf a few times, I've interviewed him a number of times as well. Nothing he says or indeed does makes me worry about him being an Islamist at all. Quite the opposite, actually.
That's not really the point. I'm talking about the demographics and the population. Say Birmingham. You know, okay. They're going to get Yusuf in, and then they're going to vote for somebody even more militant. I'm talking. This is, this is to me Islamic. They're going to take over England, and it's there. So politicians love power. Stormer loves power. Farage loves power, and if that means they're going to have to bring the Muslims in for them to have more power, it's going to happen. I just. But
are you against some? I don't want to go down a road that you don't want to go down here, Michael. But are you against any Muslim having power?
Oh, not at all.
I didn't think you were, and that's why I made the point. But that's what, Michael. Just listen to me a second. That's why I'm making the point about Islamism versus Islam. So there are people who are really worrying, dreadful people who are in the Green Party, who are in the Labour Party. But someone like, this is why I give the example of Zia Yusuf, who I believe is a patriot, who I believe is someone who wants to make this country better, and I have no concerns about him being in the cabinet if that were to happen.
Yes, absolutely. Look, Muslims are fantastic people. They're just as good as what we are, a different religion. What I'm worried about is the political system where it's geared for these cities have the majority of MPs, and the people who gain control of those cities will have control of our political system, and that's what's happening. This is why Stormer's doing every U-turn has been caused by his fear of losing seats to the Islamists. Yeah. And unfortunately, further down the line, Nigel Farage is going to go the same way. That's just the way politics has been, unfortunately.
Michael, really interesting to talk to you. Give me a ring anytime, and thank you for that.
Peter, sorry, that's what I'm trying to say.
No, I'm totally clear on what you mean now, and I really, really appreciate your call, and please do give me a ring again. That's Michael in Belfast there. What do you think of what he said there? 0344 499 1000. We'll talk in just a second about this absolutely shameful thing that has happened in Bracknell, a cover-up of a rape of a 15-year-old by a councillor's son. It is really shocking, and a crowdfunder to try to raise money for them by two other councillors. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A Talk exclusive, the Labour boss is suspended. One of them has since resigned since we put the allegations to them after a fundraiser row in a rape trial case. What happened was the mayoral consort in Bracknell, his mother was the mayor, he went around with her, cutting ribbons, opening things. Well, he was a paedophile, a rapist of a 15-year-old girl. They were charged, and what happened? Two councillors, senior councillors in Bracknell, then did a crowdfunder for their legal fees. Yes, really. And one of them was the cabinet member for children and young people. Absolutely disgraceful. People say the rape gangs and people say support for people who rape children is a thing of the past in Labour or any other party in any part of the country. They're lying. It is happening right now in 2026. We're going to get into that story in just a second. We've got Marilyn Hawes, the Chief Executive of Freedom from Abuse, standing by. We'll take your calls, text, tweets and voice notes between now and 10 o'clock. So much to talk about on Iran, on Labour, on Starmer, on Islamism, on the Green Party. We've got one caller who wants to get in who thinks that they're the same as the IRGC. Whatever you think, let me know. 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note, less than a minute please if you would. 0344 499 1000. That's the number for calls as well. So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. And confirmation in the last few minutes that the Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland is going to be on the programme tomorrow talking about Iran and what she thinks Keir Starmer should do. So much to discuss tonight though between now and 10, so stay with us. I've got a message as well from one of our regular texters, Nat in Tel Aviv, who says, my smartwatch is telling me I've had an active day with balance, stress and rest. Thanks with the former, thanks to the IRGC, and Hezbollah the latter, says Nat. I'm just coming out of the shelter. I think I've been in five times today in the shelter because of what Hezbollah is doing, bombing central Israel, and she has been reacting and dealing with that, as have so many other people as well. But Nat, if you're in the shelter and again tonight, I hope the Wi-Fi is working and I hope you can keep it to talk, because I know that is of interest and a help and helps pass the time for Nat as well, and so many Israelis who are dealing with what is going on right now there. But I want to talk about a story closer to home. This is a Talk exclusive about Labour bosses suspended after a fundraiser row in a rape trial case. Two senior Labour councillors, one of whom has resigned this evening, have been suspended, well, they've been suspended and one has resigned for reportedly promoting a crowdfunding campaign linked to the former town mayor who helped her son hide crucial evidence about the rape of a child from the police. Let me just talk you through this. Let me just give you the detail on this. So a woman called Nahid Ejaz, who's 61, she was the mayor of Bracknell Forest. She was convicted last month of perverting the course of justice. What happened was her son, Dewan Khan, was convicted at the same trial of drugging and raping a teenage girl in 2024. What did his mother do, the mayor of Bracknell Forest? First of all, he, the son, was the mayoral consort, so went along with his mum, cut the ribbons and went to all the events, smiling and shaking hands and saying, isn't it wonderful that they're representing Bracknell? The mother, when the police came to the door, this was an elected public representative in Bracknell, what did she do when the police came to the door? She said to her son in Urdu to go upstairs and hide a phone on which the court was told he had video footage of him drugging and raping the 15-year-old girl. She was covering up her paedophile son. She's been convicted of perverting the course of justice. Her son has been convicted of paedophilia, of raping a 15-year-old. So what happened next? Well, when they were charged, before they were convicted, but when they were charged, two other councillors came to their aid. Councillor Mary Temperton, who's resigned this evening, and another councillor, a man called Councillor Roy Bailey. What they did was they set up a crowdfunding campaign for their legal fees, because they were told, they say, that they were in difficulty, that these allegations were false, and they needed money for their legal team. So these councillors, Councillor Mary Temperton, who was the council leader in Bracknell Forest, set up this crowdfunder alongside Councillor Roy Bailey. Now, Mary Temperton has resigned this evening. Councillor Roy Bailey, let me tell you about him. He was the cabinet member for children and young people in Bracknell Forest. The cabinet member for children and young people, supporting a paedophile, a rapist of a 15-year-old girl. Both councillors administratively suspended from the Labour Party pending a disciplinary investigation. A Labour spokesman said, "We are appalled to learn of the crime committed by Nahida Jazz. It is right that justice has been served. The Labour Party takes all complaints seriously and they are fully investigated in line with our rules and procedures, and any appropriate action is taken." The Council Chief Executive, Susan Halliwell, said Bracknell Forest Council has been made aware that 2 councillors have been suspended by their political party. This is an internal matter for the party and the council is not involved in the party disciplinary process. The councillors remain elected members of the council unless they choose to resign their seat. That statement, obviously, before Mary Temperton resigned her seat. As with all councillors, says the statement, they are expected to continue to uphold the standards of public office and comply with the council's code of conduct. And there are some words from those councillors as well, which I will read now. Because these people were elected, these people were covering up for a rapist and were attempting to help a rapist. Let me just find the statement that they have put out in regard to this. This is Councillor Mary Temperton and indeed the other councillor, Roy Bailey. Very interesting with Roy Bailey as well, because he is the father of the Minister for Equalities. His daughter's an MP, she is the Minister for Equalities, and she is Olivia Bailey, and she has said on this, "Violence against women and girls is utterly abhorrent, and it is right that justice has now been served in this case." This is Olivia Bailey, the Labour MP for Reading West and Mid Berkshire. She's also the Minister for Equalities. The Equalities Ministry deals with things like helps deal with things like violence against women and girls as well. Just remember that in the context of all of this. She says, "I fully support the Labour Party's investigation into my father's deeply misguided actions. Violence against women and girls is utterly abhorrent. Right that justice has now been served in the case." The 2 councillors, one of whom is now resigned, Mary Temperton, and Councillor Roy Bailey, say in a joint statement, "We wholeheartedly apologise for this error in judgment. It was a completely misguided act of attempted charity made without the full facts. We have spent decades in public service and we are both mortified that an attempt at helping someone we believe to be in crisis could be construed as minimising or detracting from these appalling crimes." Construed. If someone says they're accused of a heinous crime and you're going to help them and you're going to do a crowdfunding campaign, I, for one, would want to know every single fact. I would want to talk to the police. I would want to talk to the Crown Prosecution Service. I would want to make sure I knew every single thing about that. So here we are in 2026 on the 3rd of March, and what we hear from the Labour Party and from this government and from other parties as well, I'm not getting at the Labour Party necessarily, they happen to be members of the Labour Party, all of these people, apart from the Council Chief Executive. The point is that we hear time and time and time again that rape gangs are a thing of the past. Rape gangs aren't happening. This isn't a problem. There aren't cover-ups. There's no real need for an inquiry. Labour resisted an inquiry into those rape gangs. Yet here we have, this isn't a rape gang necessarily, but this is this is people and a person specifically who ran a taxi firm. They were this family, as well as being the councillor, the mayor and the mayoral consort. What they did was they ran a taxi firm. Now, they'd had that licence taken away from them by the Labour Council. We don't know the full detail of that, but we know that is a fact. And we have, in 2026, in March, we have 2 councillors covering up, helping and attempting to put a better spin through this crowdfunder on these 2 people, one of whom told her son in Urdu to hide a phone on which he had a video of him raping a 15-year-old girl. That is what is happening right now. I'm appalled by that. Let's speak to Marilyn Hawes, who's the Chief Executive of Freedom from Abuse. Marilyn, what's your reaction?
Well, I want to thank you, Peter. It's nice to see you again. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
I really want to thank talkTV for covering this, because it's really unusual when something so awful as the Iran situation is going on, normally anything to do with child abuse is kicked into the long grass. So I want to thank you for raising this. I also want to applaud your researchers for finding this story. I used to live down the road. I used to live in Wokingham when my story with child abuse of the head teacher came up. But I just want to say this former police superintendent, wait for this, had a doctorate a doctorate in criminal justice.
Marilyn, I didn't even mention that. Councillor Roy Bailey, Cabinet Member for Children and Young People. I'll be brutally honest with you, I forgot to mention it. He's a former police superintendent, as you say. He's got a doctorate in criminal justice, and he couldn't see that these people should not have been supported at all.
Well, I would like to say he's a total numpty, but he's not, is he? Because what we're looking at here is, and I've been doing an awful lot with the rape gangs, and I'm glad you said rape gangs and not grooming gangs, because that's not what they are. They are vile, barbaric rape gangs. Worse, this isn't, but we don't know that because, you know, would there be more than one child that hasn't come through? You're looking at a blueprint, Peter. You're looking at, oh God, I'm so glad I belong to the Freedom of Speech Union, which I did ever since Starmer came in. But I am going to say it. You're looking at Asians running a taxi firm, tick box number one across the country. You're looking at Asian mayor, tick box across the country.
And what they were doing, and we got to be careful about this legally, but what they were doing, factually, that licence was taken away from them even before these allegations came up. And factually, what they did in that family-run taxi firm was they had a contract with the council, as I'm sure other taxi firms did as well, to ferry children to and from school.
Yeah, exactly. I rest my case. I mean, and then you're looking at the police involvement. You couldn't get higher than a superintendent, also Labour. You might say, I mean, and then the crowdfunding. Excuse me, the whole thing stinks. And the fact that then you've got the daughter who's a minister of equalities. Yeah. Excuse me, why isn't she being dragged into this?
Well, in fairness to Olivia Bailey, there's no suggestion that she had any knowledge or actions that took part in this. And she has, in fairness to her, condemned her father tonight.
Right, okay, fine. But the whole thing, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm going to go down the... I am going to go down the rape gang thing because I don't know whether they were Pakistani or what this family were. But you're looking time and time again of a family that will collude and work with each other to try and, like she did in Urdu, say to her son, she knew that her son had filmed the rape of that girl. I mean, and you know, she was done for the perverting in the court of justice. Well, it's worse than that. It's worse than that. But you are looking at, and I mean, you can't get away from it. I don't know whether she was Pakistani or what they were. I don't know, but an awful lot of this is Pakistanis, Bangladeshis. And yes, okay, you get white people as well. Of course you do. There's always corrupt people. But this whole thing smacks of corruption and collusion to try and close it down, to just like hide it all away. But to me, and it's awful what this man did, but to me, you got a police inspector... superintendent. You're telling me he didn't know? Of course, before you do any crowdfunding.
I mean, he has said in the joint statement with the councillor who's now resigned, he has said, "Oh, we didn't have the full facts." Surely, well, that's what he said. Oh, but surely, if you are a police superintendent with a PhD. I mean, most people with PhDs are they may not be necessarily the most street smart people, but they're generally good at assembling a few facts because they've got doctor before their name. Surely the point is that you get all the facts and then you make a decision.
Peter, even in what I do with my job, I check out everything. I do due diligence on everything because I have got a charity that I'm running that I can't... I can't have, might fall into bad hands or anything. I do due diligence on anyone that wants to join me, anyone that wants to help me. I'm not a fool. This man, I'm sorry, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I mean, he was never worthy of the doctorate or the superintendency, whatever, because the first thing anyone does in something like this, you do your due diligence. You don't raise crowdfunding to someone I don't know the facts. That doesn't cut any mustard with me whatsoever. I feel I feel is my personal opinion, and I hope it is not hate. I'm not racist, but I have dealt with all this stuff for so many years before the rape gangs ever really got to the news. I have seen it time and time and time again, where police try and cover it up because of fear of racism, or is it now two-tier policing?
I just wonder as well, Marilyn, about the mentality. I understand even if someone is evil and horrible and wrong, I can understand the initial instinct to trying to protect a family member. I think we can all understand that. But nonetheless...
I don't understand it at all. I don't understand it at all.
Let me just make the point. But the police come to your door, you're the local mayor, and your first instinct is to impede the police and cover up the rape of a 15-year-old girl.
Absolutely. And yet he's got a doctorate in criminal justice.
No. That was the mother who did that. That was Nahida Jazz, the 61-year-old who's been convicted. No worries.
I tell you honestly, Peter, you've got to look at my own situation, right? Where my very, going back 23 years, my very, very best friend of 17 years, who helped me through my divorce, domestic abuse, all of that, ended up sexually abusing my 3 sons, right? I sold him downstream once I knew what he was accused of, and that you do not protect your family in something like this. You hand them over because the people you thought they were are not. This is collusion on the part of that Asian family, and that's how they operate. I get calls all the time from Asian young women who are being abused and are being abused in their families, who won't ever talk about it. They tell me, and I say, but you're living in England. This is against the law.
Yeah.
But that culture is so deep and so patriarchal. And but the mother protected this one. I tell you now, I have always said to my own children when they were growing up, if you're into drugs, if you do anything for your own sake, I will hand you over to the police because it's called tough love, and you do not protect anyone that's raping children and taking photographs and filming them. I'm sorry, and it's part of that culture. And I asked for Councillor Roy Bailey. I mean, he should be strung up and sent to the moon on a one-way ticket.
Well, we don't want anybody we don't want anybody doing anything illegal. Certainly,
I don't want anyone to do anything. But
no, but we got to be careful just to not advocate any illegal action. Marilyn, listen, thank you very much. That's Marilyn Hawes, Chief Executive of Freedom from Abuse there. And as we know, there is no suggestion that Mary Temperton, who has now resigned, that she has done anything illegal. There's no suggestion that Roy Bailey has done anything illegal. And I know Marilyn was just speaking casually there, as some people do, but I just want to be absolutely clear that they haven't broken the law, and also we cannot advocate any form of retribution of any kind. What will happen is the disciplinary procedure, certainly within Labour. We will see what happens to Mary Temperton and whether her membership of the Labour Party is something that she's not allowed to continue. She certainly isn't a councillor anymore. She has resigned this evening, and the Cabinet Member for Children and Young People. This astonishing that a police superintendent could make such a catastrophic error of judgment. What did he know and when did he know it? I think there are many, many questions about Roy Bailey. His own daughter has said that the disciplinary process within the Labour Party is the right thing to happen. So we have Bracknell Council there, those 2 bosses suspended, one of them resigning, and this absolute scandal happening there. So what is your reaction to that? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. And this is, I've got to thank firstly the person who brought me this story. I will never reveal who that person is. And similarly, my news editor, Ricky Freelove, who did a lot of the heavy lifting on this story behind the scenes today so we could bring it to air. And Marilyn's right. It doesn't matter what's going on in the world. Iran, big issue, huge issue. We've spent the vast majority of the last couple of nights and the last 4 programmes I've done on that. But there is always room on talk for these kind of stories, always, because they are so incredibly important. And we need leaders who we can trust, and we need to protect children in our society. Whatever you think, whatever your view, you let me know. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
no doubt that the British government has acted in an incredibly weak, equivocal way. It's easy to start a war, very difficult to ensure that the aftermath doesn't descend into complete chaos.
What's your view of that outburst of Trump?
Well, Trump doesn't mince his words, but I think his criticism is justified. I mean, we should have realised where our national interest stood, and he should have expressed immediate support.
We have pursued a ludicrous energy policy, preceding this government, frankly, and all the knock-on effects to that for our economy are catastrophic.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to Rob, who asked a very good question. How do these people get to being a councillor? There's no way they should be anywhere near politics with such bad judgment. Leslie says, I love listening to Michael from Belfast a little bit earlier on. Have him on again, Peter. Very interesting. I'm very happy to receive another call from Michael in Belfast. He made some really, really good points. There are lots of people who want to make all sorts of points. Whatever your view on all the stories we're talking about this evening, whether it's Iran, whether it's what happened in Bracknell Forest, whether it's the Greens, whether it's Starmer, whatever you want to talk about, you let me know. We've plenty of time between now and 10 o'clock to get loads of calls on before Petri Hoskin comes up. She's here between 10 and 1. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. But I want to speak to Errol Moorcoach now, who is a spokesman for Republicans overseas. I wanted to get a bit more analysis on the American side of things. We heard a little bit earlier on from Marco Rubio, and I'm delighted that Errol is with me now. Good evening to you.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Errol, just in regard to Iran, where is the Republican Party on this? How split is it? Because we have the MAGA side, to some degree, perhaps, and tell me if I'm wrong, worried about this foreign war. We have others who might be more welcoming of it, people like Marco Rubio and others in Congress. And, of course, we have the Democratic reaction too. There's so many issues, though, as well, because Trump appears anyway to have changed his mind about things like regime change. The message hasn't been a consistent one. Just take me through the last 4 days from your perspective and how this is essentially playing out politically.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head there, because it is a ideologically divided party before we even got to the last 96 hours. And now, let's say the cards are revealed and the chips are on the table. And I would have to say that it's a little bit more split than 50-50. Inside of the MAGA wing, you have people like myself who are rational people who believe in things like, tactical strikes. Trump was always very dovish on invasions, but very hawkish on missile strikes, i.e. Qasem Soleimani or other examples like that. So the way that Trump intervenes is very important for how the internal Republican Party responds to it. There are people, of course, who said no foreign wars, no entanglements. This is a complete betrayal. And in some respects, I would have to point them to the campaign speeches where Donald Trump said, we will bomb the blank out of them if they try to do this and that. So Donald Trump also, and just for everybody to understand, it's very interesting because he wasn't traditionally a MAGA person. He was an establishment person, almost an American aristocrat who took over a movement of outsiders, and he was turned into an outsider. And in this situation, I think some people forgot that he is in many ways part of the establishment. He's from a generation that had a problem with Iran. The 1979 embassy takeover, those people still remember that. And that battle never really ended for them. So I think in this situation, in the context of it, he hasn't lost the support of the majority of the Republican people. However, in the MAGA wing, the people who are already fracturing against him vis-a-vis his support for Israel, or the sort of idea that he is a Bibi Netanyahu's puppet, this is sort of their evidence to say, haha, we've got him. But in the end, I think that we have a big tent with varying opinions, and that's healthy. I'm very happy to see somebody like Tucker Carlson out there pushing against the president. I'm very happy to see people who are in our party coming out and being on the other side, whether that's Thomas Massey.
And Errol, those are the Western democratic values of free speech that we have, you have in America, we have in the UK, and Iran does not have. So I totally agree with you on that. What does Congress do now, do you think?
Well, they're in a rock and a hard place, because they need to obviously respect the situation at hand, which is Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon, and Donald Trump has sort of laid the hammer down on that. Now, he has about the 90 days of executive authority privilege in terms of this operation, but we do need Congress to codify some of the funding. So I think the internal battle is going to also play more to the domestic midterms than anybody on the ground should have to hear, because people's lives are at stake in Tehran right now. And the idea that Congress is going to fund or not fund things that are going to have an impact on those people's ability to conduct an internal revolution, to rebuild their country, that would be a shame if the reason they're doing it for is for funding for roads in Cincinnati. So I think we really, really need to look at Congress, and people need to be contacting the representatives, because if the American legislature isn't behind this, it will eventually run into more and more of a situation where they scream no kings, but we sort of ironically are saying that Donald Trump has to go around the world and clean up foreign problems because Congress isn't letting him do anything in the United States. So I think that's sort of the crux of the issue. They're a dysfunctional body, and they have yet to prove themselves worthy of a compliment.
Eric, speaking of compliments, or indeed lack of them, let's hear what President Trump said about our Prime Minister here in the UK, Keir Starmer. Not exactly complimentary.
And I'm not, by the way, I'm not happy with the UK either. That island that you read about, the lease, okay, he made it for whatever reason, he made a lease of the island. Somebody came and took it away from him. And it's taken 3-4 days for us to work out where we can land there. It would have been much more convenient landing there as opposed to flying many extra hours. So we are very surprised. This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with.
This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with. I mean, I've spoken to a number of people actually over the course of the programme who have reacted to this clip. And there's sort of a lack of surprise here. This has been coming for a while, hasn't it? Because there have been various things the Republicans have done. We know that Donald Trump erred on various occasions, saying that, specifically with Afghanistan, saying that British troops weren't near the front line, which was a really, really stupid and horrible and thoughtless and careless thing to say. But nonetheless, Starmer and Trump need to be singing from the same hymn sheet. They're not on this conflict, but here we are in public with the American president saying that. What do you think, Errol?
You know, it's a very tough situation, because when you look at what's at hand, you have the Chagos Islands, which is sort of the functional, problem here. And if the British Empire ended up going under the wing of the new emerging American empire, it seems bizarre for them to be working against us in certain small interests. And these kind of behaviors, Trump waffled on that, by the way. He said, fine, give it to them, take it back. And then eventually, I think he's so sick and tired of dealing with these inept political leaders and feckless cowards that he sees compared to the Winston Churchill that he idolizes, that he has a bust of in the Oval Office. And he's wondering what on earth has happened to the Anglo-American alliance and the special relationship we had. And I think that is a huge problem, because Great Britain needs to be a leader with us. And regardless of Trump's maybe insensitive comments, which I agree with what you said was completely inappropriate that he had done that and he walked it back, but that doesn't mean that England can't step up into this new era. And I think perhaps it's going to just end up being a situation of regime change in Westminster, or Downing Street, I guess, excuse me, because it seems like Keir Starmer's not somebody we can work with, and he's not somebody who seems to be willing to join us in our mission, whereas we find leaders around the world who are much more amicable to what we're doing.
And perhaps in this country as well, I would imagine Donald Trump would rather work with Nigel Farage than Keir Starmer, possibly even Kemi Badenoch as well. We're in a weird situation where we have the Green Party now in one poll as the second party too. When it comes back to American politics, when it comes back to what America does next, they're in this for the long haul, aren't they?
Yeah, the Americans are in it for the long haul, and I think one of the problems we have with our two countries is we seem to be discorrelating our elections. We go right, you guys go left. We swing back, you guys swing back, and so we're not able to really coordinate this, and it's leading to these problems. And unless there's going to be someone domestically in the UK who stands up and sort of changes this, I foresee perhaps the United States finding other partners that are willing to step up and step in.
Always good to talk to you, Errol Moorcoach. Thank you. He is from Republicans Overseas, one of their spokesmen. What do you think of what he said? 0344 499 1000. We're going to devote the rest of the programme to your calls. We'll also speak to Petra Hoskin about what's coming up on her show between 10 and 1. There are loads of things we've talked about tonight. We've talked about Iran, we've talked about Starmer, we've talked about Bracknell and that shameful story there. Matt in Grimsby says, I've got to say, I am raging. Watching your show with my wife, we're absolutely gobsmacked, says Matt, regarding the story of what happened in Bracknell. If there's a cover-up of this, what else has been covered up by that council? Well, I don't know if there was a cover-up necessarily, but there was absolutely a disgusting error of judgment, a dreadful thing that happened. No illegality is alleged against Mary Temperton and Councillor Roy Bailey, but certainly the two people, the mayor of Bracknell Forest, who covered up for her son, a paedophile, a rapist of a 15-year-old girl who he drugged and raped, and then there was a crowdfunder? Really? It defies belief. We'll take your calls next here on Talk. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
So much to discuss in the next 23 minutes here on Talk. Petra Hoskin, we'll speak to her. She's coming up between 10 and 1. But let me take your calls first. Firstly, from Georgina in London, who wants to react to our Talk exclusive about the Mayor of Bracknell. Georgina, your thoughts?
Well, Peter, I'm totally sickened by what I heard. We really need to closely scrutinise these individuals from different cultures that we're allowing into our governmental system. Not all cultures are the same, Peter, and what's acceptable regarding sexual preference in Pakistan or other countries is most definitely not allowed here in Britain, especially where our children are concerned.
I totally agree with you on that, Georgina, but there were, as far as I know, Councillor Mary Temperton, now not a councillor anymore, and Councillor Roy Bailey are white British people who were attempting to support them. their solidarity with the paedophile, their solidarity with the paedophile's mother who covered up for him, well, that was so sorely misplaced at the very least.
Oh, at the very least, Peter. I mean, the rape of our little girls within our country is absolutely sickening and abhorrent. And to think that this heinous act has been carried out and then covered up by a councillor representing any government party is absolutely sickening. These people, Peter, are supposed to be someone that you can trust, someone who you would look up to and aspire to be. But it seems that, to me, that we're allowing anybody into these high-ranking positions, and the governmental system has become a den of iniquity.
Do you know what worries me? Do you know what worries me as well, Georgina? It's the insouciance. It's the fact that Keir Starmer resisted the inquiry into the rape gangs. It's the fact that they say, oh, this is a historical matter. This is something where things have changed, lessons have been learned. There's already been an inquiry by Alexis J. Now, we don't know if this particular rape of a 15-year-old was linked to a rape gang, but what we do know was a rape of a child. A paedophilic action took place. This was horrendous. It shouldn't have happened. And here we are in 2026. And still, this is a scandal. Still, the rape of children is happening.
You're so right, Peter. You're so right. I mean, a mother in such a position of trust, covering up such a heinous act, committed by her own son. I mean, I've got 4 sons of my own, grown-up men of my own. And I tell you now, if I thought for 1 minute that my sons had committed anything so heinous, I would fog march them to the police station myself. And I'm not joking. You know, it's unforgivable. But then to be helped by others within the party to raise money from the general public to fight their case is adding insult to injury. Peter, we've really got to take a good long look into who we're allowing into these positions of trust and power, as we're being taken for fools, and our kindness is being taken as weakness. And it's our children, my love, are the ones who are suffering for our mistakes.
Georgina, sorry, go ahead.
Unfortunately, the way things stand at the moment, if we do raise our deep concern about such differences between cultures, I know that the people who helped her were white, and they disgust me. Totally disgust me. But, you know, if we call out people from different cultures, Peter, we are called racist or bigot for voicing our concerns. Our children are not here for the sexual pleasure from men from different cultural backgrounds, Peter, and every child attacked is important. That's somebody's baby. They matter, and we have to be there for them and be their voice, because it doesn't seem to me that anyone's doing it, Peter.
Well, you're absolutely right, Georgina, and thank you for your points this evening. Graham says, thank goodness we have fine, upstanding councillors in Bracknell who are happy to put their colleagues' interests before the needs of their voters. The fish rots from the head down, says Graham in Bushy. It should be said that Mary Temperton has resigned as a councillor this evening, and there is no suggestion of any criminality against Mary Temperton or indeed Roy Bailey. But yes, in my view, they had a catastrophic error of judgment. In their own view, they had a catastrophic error of judgment at the very least. Brian's in Blackpool wants to talk about the Green Party, another political party under scrutiny at the moment. Brian, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good evening, Peter. First, I've got a complaint.
Go for it.
You're still not on the advert.
I'm still not on the advert. Brian, in the scheme of things, with the Middle East in flames, with many problems you know, that we're talking about in this programme, I think me being on the adverts probably isn't the biggest one. But nonetheless, thank you, and I promise I'll take that to management.
Right, yes, well, please do. Now, look, I served in the IDF in 67 and 73.
I remember you telling me before, Brian. I remember that, yeah.
Yes. Right, I've been a London cab driver for 50 years. I've been around the political scene for 50 years. I've met many politicians, and I've met a lot of Lebanese, and I've met a lot of people from Iran.
Yeah.
Now, they all turn around and say, the Green Party of today is exactly starting out as it did in 48 years ago, because in Iran it was the hard left and the Islamist radicals that took over the demonstration from the ordinary people that were annoyed against the Shah.
Do you really think that the Green Party in this country is being duped or is willfully doing the same thing as happened in Iran? I mean, that's a pretty strong allegation to make.
Yeah, well, I believe who's behind it all is the Brotherhood.
which is still not a prescribed organisation in this country. The IRGC not prescribed, the Muslim Brotherhood not prescribed, and I'm not just talking about the Labour government. I challenged Priti Patel, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, who was the Home Secretary. She didn't prescribe the IRGC or the Muslim Brotherhood, and she could have done that as Home Secretary. The Conservatives failed too.
I did exactly the same. I talked to her and I said exactly the same. I've met many politicians. I've met many prime ministers and ministers over the years. Yeah. And of course I can't repeat what they've ever said. But they know full well they were always scared to offend a certain community. It started after Blair. It got steadily worse.
Yeah. Well, listen, Brian, I think you make some really, really good points there, and thank you for them. We're going to take more calls after the break. Stay with us here on Talk.
No doubt that the British government has acted in an incredibly weak, equivocal way. It's easy to start a war, very difficult to ensure that the aftermath doesn't descend into complete chaos.
What's your view of that outburst of Trump?
Well, Trump doesn't mince his words, but I think his criticism is justified. I mean, we should have realised where our national interest stood, and he should have expressed immediate support.
We have pursued a ludicrous energy policy, preceding this government, frankly, and all the knock-on effects to that for our economy are catastrophic.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Plenty of calls coming in on 0344 499 1000. I'll take as many as I can tonight. If you don't get in with me, have a chat to Petri Hoskin. She's here between 10 and 1, or you can give me a ring tomorrow night. I'm here every night this week between 7 and 10. Mark is in Richmond. Mark, Richmond in Southwest London or Richmond in Hull?
Southwest London.
Oh, I would live there if I was a millionaire. It's a beautiful part of the world.
Yeah, well, yes, it's beautiful, but it's an interesting place to live. I'm actually quite a new person here, but that's a different story.
Okay, Mark, tell us your thoughts on Keir Starmer.
Well, okay. First, I want to congratulate you on your new time slot. Well done.
That's really kind. Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
I've been listening to you for some time, and you've been very good. Now, my thought about Keir Starmer is that, looking at it from a practical perspective, if he knew, well, it sounds like they did know on Friday what was going to happen.
Yeah, they evacuated various personnel and so on. Yeah.
He knew that we were going to all be tarred. All English-speaking people were going to be tarred with the same brush by the Iranians. I mean, I remember I was in Mexico several years ago at a time when the USA was not very popular, and I remember seeing a group of Canadian tourists come through wearing the same T-shirt with Canada written on them. It was like this T-shirt was going to protect you and say you're not different from an American. It's like, no, of course not. You're just an English-speaking gringo. To the Mexicans, you were just a gringo. And the other thing is that he talks about international law, but when you talk about law, you want to speak about you're appealing to a higher authority because you're saying obeying the law comes from a higher authority. Which higher authority are we talking about? I mean, what's the highest authority he's talking to? Is he talking to the United Nations? They're not authority anymore.
Well, and your point there, Mark, illustrates how much things are changing, because words I have heard very little about, words I've heard very infrequently in the last few days are NATO, United Nations, European Union, ASEAN, Board of Peace, any of these huge international organizations. This is America acting with allies. This is the New World Order. The Middle East is shifting, but even just Trump taking action kind of by himself, obviously with Israel, but with some other support from allies in different ways, that's new, that's different.
Exactly, and there, to my mind, there is no higher authority now. It may have been in the past, but even then, it was always a rigged game.
Well, I agree with you, Mark. I'm sorry to make another point, but don't you think that so many of those so-called higher authorities have actually diminished their own authority by themselves in many, many ways? We had Antonio Guterres, the head of the United Nations, congratulating Iran on their anniversary of the revolution that brought the Islamists to power. I mean, why on earth would I take Antonio Guterres seriously on anything when he has praised the Iranian regime just a few days ago?
Yeah, I know. It's just a ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I've got another little story about you. This goes back a long time ago. I actually met a Iranian pilot who escaped from Iran in 1979 in his jet.
Wow!
And I met him just briefly, but he actually was studying ornithology in Cardiff University, where I went. And I met him in 1982, and we were sitting there. And the only thing he kept on saying all night was, "I didn't see it coming." And so it's just it's always stuck with me. It's something that people just aren't seeing it coming. They think everything's going fine, and all these changes are happening around them, and they just didn't see it coming. But I think Starmer's, it's flawed. There is no higher authority to appeal to. Yeah. So to say international law, it's like, well, who's going to enforce that? Well, no one's going to enforce that anyway. Because you need a law only works if there's an enforcement behind it, and there's none.
Well, you're absolutely right, and that's a very, very fair point, Mark. Listen, thank you for that. Apologies for any language that Mark used. I don't think he meant to, that some people may have found offensive in the last call. Apologies for that, but if there was any language that some people may have found offensive in the last call, I'm sure Mark didn't mean to offend anybody, but just to be clear on that point. I want to talk to Cindy from Michigan now, who has given me a ring about Starmer. Very interesting to get an American perspective. Cindy, what are your thoughts this evening?
Always such a good show, Peter.
Thank you, Cindy.
Always. I want to say that I don't feel like Starmer is standing with the majority of the British people. He's not acting in the best interest. I feel like maybe perhaps he's worried a little bit more about a certain constituency that he has, possibly. That's also a thought. And he's operating more from a lawyer perspective, a lawyer's eyes. And it's like the really good friend, the good friend that you had that wasn't there for you.
Yes.
You know, it hurts like that almost. Like, what's going on? I want to take Starmer and shake him a little bit, you know, in a friendly way, of course, and say, what's going on with you?
What do you feel, Cindy? Tell us your thoughts about what Trump has done and indeed said. Do you think he's taken the right course of action here?
As far as what his
Iran,
actions with Iran?
Yes.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I feel that he's taken a stance that no other president has had cojones to take. and I feel that something needs to be done to protect. Look at how the women are being treated.
Yes.
All the people that are being killed, for God's sake, you know.
Yes.
It's time. And I stand with Trump. I really support him with everything that he's done thus far in his presidency, 100% of the way. I think he's been the greatest president that we have had. I really do.
Thank you, Cindy. I appreciate your call and appreciate your loyalty all the way from Michigan in the United States. Jones in Sunderland and wants to react to one of the calls we had a little bit earlier on. Michael in Belfast was chatting to us about the threat from Islamism. Joan, your thoughts on this? Thanks for your call.
Hello.
Hi there.
I can understand exactly where that man is coming from. And what happened with the Greens is quite worrying. So I would say to people who love this country and are worried about the way this country is going, they have the answer in their own hands. We have elections coming up on the 7th of May, so get out there and vote. Because if you're too lazy and you don't use your vote, don't moan when you end up with someone else's choice.
This is something that I feel very strongly about, Joan, and you, as a woman, will know that there are women who sacrificed their lives. There are people who protested for women to have the vote. And when people don't use the vote, male or female, it drives me round the bend. What also drives me round the bend is what happens in so much of England, where people get postal votes for no reason. And there is clearly a lot of fraud that happens there. If you're elderly, if you're infirm, if you're disabled, I have no issue with you getting a postal vote. That's absolutely fine. But people who just couldn't be bothered to go to the voting station to exercise their democratic right, that annoys me that they have such contempt for that system. And I think it should be taught in schools. Use your vote, because if you don't vote, you shouldn't complain.
Well,
Joan, what do you think of that, Joan?
Well, I'm pleased that you brought up this thing about postal votes and what have you, because I also think there's an awful lot of fraud. And I think there should be people in the polling stations, and if there's any more of this family voting, all of that should be stopped, because it's an absolute disgrace.
Joan, the first time I voted in England, it was jaw-dropping to me that I could go in without any identification. It's different now, but without any identification, go into a polling booth and say, my name is Joan and I live in Sunderland, or maybe not Joan, but John, and I have this address, and suddenly they just hand me the piece of paper and off I went and voted. It was astonishing. Voter ID has now come in, but I mean, in Northern Ireland, we had so many problems over so many years. They changed the system, and every single person has to fill in a form, rather than simply saying, right, these are the people that live in my home, and I'll do one form for the whole house or for the whole flat. And the point is that it changed things dramatically. Far fewer people were registered to vote.
Pardon?
Far fewer people were registered to vote. They got to the bottom of it, Joan, and we have to do that. It has to be a fair and reasonable system, doesn't it?
Yes, but when you think Starmer was going to deny nearly 5 million people the vote for the second year running, and he had to abandon that because he was told it would fail legally.
Yeah.
So an extra 5 million have been granted that vote.
Yes.
And if they are too lazy to use it, just look at Birmingham. They're going to put over 60 representatives up. Now, in Parliament, we're going to get more and more independent MPs.
Yeah.
I am
I'm worried about that too, because I see what some of those people did, particularly Shaukat Adam, who I'd love to talk to in this programme. I've asked him many, many times over West Midlands Police and what happened in regard to Maccabi Tel Aviv, which was absolutely shameful. Thank you to Stephen Millings in Belfast, who says, I know the world is about to explode in many directions, but lovely to hear another of you commenting that you're still not on the Talk advert. Thank you, Stephen. That is obviously the biggest issue in the world right now. Petri Hoskin is with us between 10 and 1.
It took me about 2 years, so I wouldn't...
Been here for 4.5.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know, but I mean, it took a long time. Hello, nice to see you. Right, yes, so coming up for the Talkback Hour, I want to ask if London marches linked to the Iranian regime should be banned or not. This is taking place on March the 15th here in London, and it brings out lots of people who appear to not very much like this country. I always have the question: if you like the Ayatollah so much, why weren't you living under the regime? But I mean, nobody's ever answered that question for me. But it would be interesting to see if people think, because freedom of speech is a central tenet. I don't agree with banning anything. I think people should have the right to say what they want.
What about this vigil tomorrow in Manchester for the Ayatollah?
Yeah, I know. It's very, very odd. But, you know, this is a free country. Do we allow it to go ahead even though we find it distasteful, or do we ban it, much like the